Chapter 1470. This was the 50th year of Enlin's disappearance. 5 massive bronze gates suddenly appeared on the Tai-Chu continent. They were over 1,000,000 feet tall and were so solid that even Tao integration stage super mighty figures were unable to move them. These 5 bronze gates were located in the East Sea, West Sea, Southern Heavenly Wing Nation, Extreme North Plains, and the White Nectar Sea. The emergence of the bronze gates shook the entire world. The 5 gates were wide open, and a pure white light shone from within. Many living beings were struck by a natural sense of fear toward the 5 gates. They could sense the powerful spatial power of the 2 worlds within the gates, and no one knew what would emerge from within. They tried everything they could to close the 5 gates, but they all failed. Even the God of Creation stage gods couldn't do anything to those gates. They couldn't close them, and they couldn't enter them. They didn't know what was within the gates either. Immediately afterward, a year later, a group of very special living beings finally emerged from within the gates. They had skin as pristine as snow and a head of white hair. They were very similar to snow maidens, but their eyes were golden, and they exuded a regal and holy aura. They referred to themselves as the Heavenly Human Tribe, living beings who carried out the will of the heavens. Enlin's expression stirred upon hearing this. He finally understood where these strange and special living beings had come from. Living beings who carried out the will of the heavens? Aren't they afraid that the Darkwing tribe will retaliate against them for saying that? Enlin asked with a smile. The Darkwing tribe were extremely arrogant on the Tai-Chu continent, and it was said that they were also the ambassadors of the heavens who carried out the will of the heavens. Wouldn't that create a conflict between the 2 tribes? Su Xiaolan nodded upon hearing this. The Darkwing tribe and the Heavenly Human tribe really did battle. The Darkwing tribe participated in the battle at the Bronze Gate of the White Nectar Sea, but they were completely crushed. After that, they didn't dare to show their faces for the past few decades. Enlin was shocked. The Darkwing tribe has over 10 mighty figures at the Return to Void Pinnacle stage, and there's even a Tao integration stage super mighty figure among them. Yet they were beaten into seclusion? It can't be, right? He had seen Su Xiaolan and the others in battle. Return to Void stage mighty figures were at least a powerful trump card for the Heavenly Human tribe, let alone Tao integration stage super mighty figures. Actually, the Heavenly Human tribe is far more powerful than you can imagine. A rare expression of seriousness appeared on Su Xiaolan's face at the mention of the Heavenly Human tribe. They have a total of 5 cultivation stages: Qi refining stage, arcane body stage, soul piercing stage, heaven pioneer stage, and divine heaven stage. Among them, the spirit refining stage can crush our Tao body stage. The arcane body stage can crush our spirit nurturing stage. The soul piercing stage can crush our soul formation stage. The heaven pioneer stage can crush our return to void stage. And the divine heaven stage can crush our Tao integration stage. Su Xiaolan continued. Enlin's expression changed again. There's a heavenly God? He had thought that the heaven pioneer stage was the pinnacle of the Heavenly Human tribe, but who would have thought that there was a divine heaven stage as well? That's right, and every sect has at least one divine heaven stage super mighty figure. Su Xiaolan's brows furrowed slightly as she said in a heavy voice. Hence, even the Darkwing tribe, a first-rate power on the Tai-Chu continent, would be forced into seclusion if they fought the Heavenly Human tribe head-on. It's already a miracle that they didn't get annihilated. This is simply a one-sided massacre. Wait, Enlin's eyes lit up as he said, where are our God of Creation stage super mighty figures? God of Creation stage super mighty figures can crush divine heaven stage super mighty figures, and Tao integration stage super mighty figures can crush heaven pioneer stage super mighty figures. We should be the ones crushing them. Su Xiaolan heaved a forlorn sigh. That's what we thought as well. However, God of Creation stage super mighty figures are immediately subjected to a frenzied backlash from the heavenly Tao. If they want to strike, they have to do it at the most critical moment. To put it in simpler terms, they're still in a state of concealment. I see. Doesn't that mean the entire Tai Chu continent is going to be crushed by the heavenly human tribe? Lin asked with a concerned expression. He knew that even Heaven Pioneer stage great generals possessed relatively weak Dao integration stage combat prowess. As such, he didn't even dare to imagine just how terrifyingly powerful divine heaven stage opponents would be. Not necessarily. Su Xiaolan shook her head as she explained. Apparently, the heavenly human tribe is a perfect race created by a heavenly god. They are living beings forced into the continent by the heavenly Tao, so they're subject to the suppression of the will of the heavens. The more powerful the heavenly human tribe, the more they will be suppressed. In other words, the clan spirit of the heaven deity tier had now encountered a similar awkward situation as the great elites of the Genesis tier. Once it made a move, it would suffer a backlash. However, the degree of the backlash is different, and they seem to be able to strike under certain conditions. And Lin finally understood the predicament the heavenly human tribe was in upon hearing this. The heavenly human tribe was able to borrow the power of the heavens at the soul-piercing stage, but at the same time, their power was constantly being suppressed by the heavens, which was very similar to the situation of the heavenly gods. Su Xiaolan continued, the heavenly human tribe represents the will of the heavens and is led by the great heavenly god of light. They only have one objective, and that is to destroy the human race. The heavenly human tribe is advancing from 5 different directions. They're killing gods and Buddhas in their way. All forces and civilizations that resist have become history. And Lin could imagine just how brutal and merciless the battles were. He couldn't help but sigh with emotion. How cruel! The great heavenly god of light is only capable of slaughter. All of a sudden, a thought seemed to have occurred to him, and his eyes narrowed slightly. Wait, did you just say the great heavenly god of light? Are there different levels of powers of the heavenly gods? I'll have to start from the second year after the heavenly human tribe emerged. At the time, the heavenly speed god was defeated by the 4th heavenly disciple of the heaven-crushing sect, the ancient dragon empress. Only then did the heaven-crushing sect discover that even though the heavenly gods are all manifestations of the heavenly Tao and represent the heavens, there are different levels of power. There are 6 paramount levels of power of the heavenly gods: sky, earth, sea, life, light, and darkness. They represent the origin of the heavenly Tao. Below the paramount levels of power of the heavenly gods are many normal levels of power of the heavenly gods, such as Lan Xiaoni's water, as well as the deceased powers of wind, lightning, time, speed, and gravity that have returned to the heavenly Tao. And Lin's mouth gaped open upon hearing Su Xiaolan's words. Just the heavenly wind god alone is about to destroy the celestial court. How are we supposed to defend against the combined attacks of so many heavenly gods? Su Xiaolan waved a slender finger. First of all, there are conflicts between the powers of the heavenly gods. They're split into 2 factions, one of which advocates for the extermination of the human race. The light, sea, and earth gods are all leaders of this faction. And Lin was excited. What about the other faction? They want to help the human race correct its mistakes? Su Xiaolan shook her head. The other faction is led by the heavenly sky god and the life god. They advocate for the extermination of all living beings on the continent. They want to wipe out all life and start over. And Lin, Su Xiaolan continued, hence, the powers of the heavenly gods have different opinions, resulting in many conflicts and conflicts between them. Most importantly, the more powerful a heavenly god is, the easier it is for them to be suppressed. Paramount heavenly gods still don't dare to appear on the Tai Chu continent. As for normal heavenly gods, they are indeed very powerful, but they are no longer as powerful as they were in the past, as they are afraid of the heaven-crushing sect. Chapter 1471. And Lin had guessed this a long time ago. Chen Shun killing the heavenly time god and the ancient dragon empress killing the heavenly speed god were the best proof of this. In this world, there were still powerful beings who could find a way to combat the heavens. Su Xiaolan continued, The heaven-crushing sect has announced that any mighty figure at the Return of Void stage or above who joins the heaven-crushing sect will receive the power to oppose the heavens from the heavenly disciple. That's right, regardless of whether it's the heavenly human tribe or the representatives of the heavenly gods. All of them are fearful of the heaven-crushing sect. And Lin nodded. Then there should be many mighty figures who join the heaven-crushing sect, right? Actually, Su Xiaolan hesitated momentarily before continuing. Almost all of the mighty figures in the Kingdom of the Nine States have joined the heaven-crushing sect, except for the 4-9 immortal sect, she added. And Lin's mouth gaped open with a dumbstruck expression. What about the emperors of the celestial court? They're all members of the heaven-crushing sect. Su Xiaolan nodded. And Lin, he wondered what the celestial arch, the second-in-command of the heaven-mending sect, would feel if all of his subordinates and comrades in the Kingdom of the Nine States had become members of an enemy force. Would he feel like he was out of place? So none of you joined the heaven-crushing sect? Why? And Lin asked. Su Xiaolan turned toward Lin with a gentle expression. The sect leader of our 4-9 immortal sect didn't even say anything, so we didn't dare to join the heaven-crushing sect. And Lin's heart jolted upon hearing this. He knew that there was a very good chance that he wouldn't be able to make it back under those circumstances. However, everyone in the 4-9 immortal sect persisted and waited for his return. This kind of unity and conviction was something that Lin had never imagined. He had inadvertently created such an adorable sect. Su Xiaolan continued, "We humans have no choice. Regardless of which heavenly god it is, the destruction of the human race is their top priority. So we can only resist." Wait, isn't there still the heaven-mending sect? Did they do anything? For example, recruiting people? And Lin suddenly asked. Su Xiaolan slightly furrowed her brows as she pondered over her distant memories. Then, she lightly shook her head and said, "The heaven-mending sect disappeared without a trace after you disappeared. They didn't stand on the world stage, and we don't know what they did." After the war broke out, many forces on the continent began to target the human race. They believed that as long as the human race is destroyed, all of this disaster will end. Only by participating in the war against humanity would we be able to tell the authorities who want to destroy all living beings on this continent that they are harmless and stand on the side of the heavens. Hopefully, we can convince the authorities to change their minds and not destroy them. And Lin took a deep breath. Hence, our enemies aren't just the heavenly human tribe and the representatives of the heavenly Tao. There are also other powers on this continent. Su Xiaolan nodded lightly. If it weren't for the fact that the heaven-crushing sect has an ambiguous attitude toward the human race, perhaps the human race would already be gone. Who would have thought that a powerful being from the true demon tribe would side with the human race? And Lin was also a little surprised by the heaven-crushing sect's decision, especially when the second-in-command of the heaven-crushing sect, Chen Shun, was still unknown. To think that the first-in-command of the heaven-crushing sect would choose to side with the human race. Su Xiaolan continued. At that time, it was no longer a matter of who they supported. All of the tribes only had one thought in mind, and that was to survive. In order to survive, all of them chose sides. Some chose to join the side of the heavens, such as the sinister spirit beast cesspool, void spirit realm, dark marshlands, creation realm, western heavenly dragon forest. Some chose to join the heaven-crushing sect and stand with the human race, such as the spirit lake realm, holy paradise, demon realm, Wessie alliance. Some chose to hide and observe from the world, such as the Nordsong mountain realm, southern heavenly wing nation. All in all, an earth-shattering battle that swept through the entire Tai Chu continent erupted at that time. As one of the most powerful sects in the human race, our 4-9 immortal sect naturally couldn't stay out of this battle either. Almost all of our sect joined the battle and fought alongside the human race. And Lin's heart was stirred again as he spoke. Su Xiaolan tucked a few strands of hair behind her ear, revealing her translucent earlobes. A hint of sorrow appeared in her eyes as she looked at Lin. What followed next was a battle that I couldn't back down from. Something else was added to my life. I went from cultivating, teaching disciples, beating up little Huang, and waiting for Lin to cultivating, teaching disciples, beating up little Huang, participating in the battle, and waiting for Enlin. Enlin's lips twitched. You're still going on with the beating up little Huang? Of course. He's very mischievous, so I have to teach him a lesson, Su Xiaolan replied with a matter-of-fact expression. Enlin had nothing to say to that, and he continued to listen to Su Xiaolan's recount of the battle that had lasted for several decades. The heavenly human tribe attacked the kingdom of the 9 states in the east and the heavenly paradise in the west at the same time, sealing off all avenues of retreat in an attempt to wipe out the entire human race. That's right, the monks and Buddhas of the heavenly paradise were actually humans as well. No human could escape from the judgment of the heavens. The West Sea Alliance was the first to bear the brunt of the heavenly human tribe's attack on the Western Front. The West Sea Alliance didn't have much of a relationship with the human race, but they were the first foreign tribe to declare their allegiance to the human race at this critical juncture. They stood up without any hesitation and used the power of their entire alliance to forge the West Sea into an impenetrable fortress. This event created a massive stir across the entire Tai Chu continent. The battle on the West Sea was the most brutal. Apparently, the blood of the Heavenly Turtle Tribe and the Spirit Fish Clan had stained the entire Blue Sea red. The blood of the Heavenly Human Tribe had also stained the ocean with a layer of white blood. After several decades, the Heavenly Human Tribe was still unable to break through the West Sea's defensive line. The Heavenly Human Tribe on the southern front was defended by the Snake Spirit Clan of the Spirit Lake Realm. They had once belonged to Nuwa's forces, but now they had joined the Heaven-Crushing sect and stood on the same side as the human race. This was quite intriguing. The Heavenly Human Tribe on the northern front and the central White Nectar Sea were defended by the Western Paradise and the Holy Paradise. The Kingdom of the 9 States had to face the Heavenly Human Tribe on the eastern front. The Dragon Core of the Eastern Seas was completely unable to defend against the Heavenly Human Tribe. They rushed toward the Kingdom of the 9 States as soon as they saw the Heavenly Human Tribe. This was the 60th year of Enlin's disappearance, the 10th year of the Tai Chu Continent World War. Aside from the Western Front, all of the other battlefronts have been pulled back. The Heavenly Human Tribe on the Eastern Front had already invaded the Kingdom of the 9 States. Su Xiaolan made a breakthrough during a desperate battle and attained the dual divine Tao of the Vermilion Bird and True Dragon, thereby slaying 16 soul-piercing stage generals in the Ancient Void state. Perhaps it was because of one battle after another, or perhaps it was because she was on the brink of death over and over again. Not only did Su Xiaolan experience this, but all of the other human race powerful beings in the Kingdom of the 9 States, especially the powerful beings of the 4-9 Immortal sect, experienced a surge in their power. Chapter 1472. Dabai, Beilian, Sun Yulaw, Lu Qinhuan, Su Qinyun, Xinyuan Cheng, Xiaoqiu, Bai Yao, Yao Mingxi, Tang Shimen. All of them progressed to the return to Void stage. Cassidy, Merlin, Bryce, and Xiaohong all attained the Divine Tao and progressed to the return to Void final stage, thereby becoming one of the most powerful return to Void final stage mighty figures. No one was surprised, but Enlin was a little unsettled upon hearing that Xiaohong had also become a return to Void final stage living being. Xiaohong has only just reached the return to Void stage, but she's already attained the power of the Divine Tao. He actually knew Xiaohong very well. She was even more of a salted fish than a plant. Could it be that she encountered some miraculous encounters during her time here? Enlin asked. Su Xiaolan shook her head. No, aside from the occasional battle, all she did was bask in the sun every day. She even attained the Tao realm true intent of transforming into a golden crow before attaining the divine Tao. Enlin, Su Xiaolan seemed to know what Enlin was thinking, and a smile appeared on her face. Perhaps the purer a living being's mind is, the easier it is for them to see their own Tao. Xiaohong basks in the sun day after day, praising the sun, so she'll eventually attain some enlightenment from it. Her aptitude is also quite terrifying. Enlin heaved a forlorn sigh. There are some living beings who have basked in the sun countless times longer than she has. There are even living beings who have basked in the sun for tens of thousands of years, but they might not even be returned to Void Stage cultivators. Xiao Hong has progressed to the return to Void Final Stage in just a few decades. Her aptitude is truly unfathomable. Just what kind of freakish prodigy was Xiao Hong, who had accidentally killed herself while sitting on the ground? To think that he would encounter such a strange plant. 149 immortal sect member after another became more and more powerful, and its influence in the Kingdom of the Nine States and even the entire Tai Chu continent grew more and more pronounced. However, Xiao Tu's breakthrough had brought about a fundamental change in its status. The 65th year after Enlin's disappearance, Xiao Tu successfully progressed to the Dao integration stage in the grassland outside the 4-9 immortal sect, and his eternal and indestructible dragon body soared into the sky. Lightning clouds surged for tens of thousands of kilometers, causing mountains and rivers to tremble and the heavens to tremble. Xiao Tu became the first Dao integration stage super mighty figure of the 4-9 immortal sect, as well as the first Dao integration stage Easter dragon on the Tai Chu continent. Even the dragon court of the Eastern Seas didn't have any Dao integration stage Easter dragons. This event shook the entire Tai Chu continent. The 4-9 immortal sect also officially became one of the 5 super immortal sects of the Kingdom of the Nine States, and a first-rate power on the Tai Chu continent. Furthermore, they were unquestionably one of the 5 major sections. Xiao Tu's breakthrough was like the beginning of a domino effect. He had paved the way for the future of the dragon tribe. Ao Xiao Wu, who had been hesitating this entire time, suddenly opened her eyes. Heaven and earth within a radius of 5,000 kilometers fell silent for 81 days. When the wind rose and the clouds moved again, a red-clothed woman had already resonated with heaven and earth as she gracefully stood above the 9 heavens. The dragon core of the Eastern Seas finally welcomed their first Dao integration stage true dragon, Ao Xiaowu, within the ancient void state of the Kingdom of the Nine States. The most intense battle in history erupted between the Kingdom of the Nine States United Army and the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army. 6 heaven-opening stage gods, over 100 soul-piercing stage gods, and tens of thousands of Heavenly Human Tribe powerful beings all sprang into action at the same time in an attempt to annihilate the entire human race. Mountains and rivers were shattered during this battle, and the heavens wept tears of blood as destructive power reduced everything within a radius of tens of thousands of kilometers to scorched earth. This was the most intense moment of the battle. A spring breeze suddenly blew over a radius of over 100,000 kilometers. All the members of the Nine States United Army found that they had an extra layer of transparent armor on their bodies that could block all spells. This process lasted for a full 10 seconds. In other words, during the most intense moment of the battle, all of the soldiers on one side suddenly received 10 seconds of invincibility. What kind of experience was that? The Heavenly Human Tribe United Army was in despair. Due to this sudden development, the Kingdom of the Nine States United Army instantly won, and the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army was forced to retreat to over 100,000 kilometers away from the Kingdom of the Nine States. At that time, a handsome young man stood at the forefront of the Kingdom of the Nine States United Army. From that day onward, the name of the second Dao integration stage true dragon of the 4-9 immortal sect reverberated throughout the entire continent. The 4-9 immortal sect's name was once again renowned throughout the world. The Heavenly Human Tribe United Army's first crushing defeat caused their offensive to slow down. Su Xiaolan was quite elated to see the sect flourishing with each passing day, and she often traveled to the border of the opposite shore realm to inform the world of the changes that had taken place in the 4-9 immortal sect. If Enlin could hear what she was saying, he would definitely be very happy. The sect was getting better and better, and it was about time for the sect leader, Enlin, to come back and visit, right? Su Xiaolan's words were drowned out by the wind and snow. This was a very foolish behavior, but she persisted and firmly believed that one day her words would reach Enlin's ears, and he would hear her call. Su Xiaolan's life was still very simple and pure. cultivating, teaching disciples, fighting little Huang, participating in battles, and waiting for Enlin. Day after day, year after year, the 75th year after Enlin's disappearance, a holy flame suddenly engulfed the entire Vermilion Bird sect atop the kingdom of the Nine States Divine Tree. A living being that had transcended the great Tao of heaven and earth broke through the heavens and rested atop the divine tree. All of the Vermilion Bird sect disciples witnessed an unforgettable scene. A true holy beast had appeared before their eyes. This was the true master of the divine tree, the one and only holy beast Vermilion Bird, which had been born from chaos. Thankfully, the Vermilion Bird bore no ill will toward the disciples of the Vermilion Bird sect. It only barged into the mystic realm of the Vermilion Bird trial grounds, and no one knew what it was searching for. The restriction that prevented cultivators above the return to void stage from entering the Vermilion Bird trial grounds was completely useless against this holy beast. Now that the restriction was broken, many disciples and elders curiously followed him in. They seemed to have heard some kind of call. This was the call of the holy vermilion flame within their bodies, calling for them to enter the Vermilion Bird trial grounds. This was a call that they couldn't resist, and they didn't want to resist. That's right, the holy flame on the divine tree was the essential flame of the Vermilion Bird. Strictly speaking, they were the most legitimate inheritors of the holy beast Vermilion Bird. Almost all of the disciples of the Vermilion Bird sect could sense its summoning power. Su Xiaolan, who just so happened to be absorbing the power of the holy flame, immediately extinguished the summoning power of the Vermilion Bird within her body before following along with the Vermilion Bird. She didn't think that she would already be targeted by the Vermilion Bird at that time. A massive battle erupted within the Vermilion Bird trial grounds. Countless ancient ferocious beasts began to awaken from their slumber as they unleashed boundless ferocious might. This was the terrifying scene that Enlin witnessed in his final moments within the Vermilion Bird trial grounds. The holy beast Vermilion Bird's objective was to raise all of the ancient ferocious beasts to the ground. In this unique space, its power was restricted, but that didn't matter. All of the other members of the Vermilion Bird sect had become even more powerful under the enhancement of its power. Over 10,000 ferocious beasts were slain by the elders and disciples of the Vermilion Bird sect, and they all felt like their cultivation bases had improved significantly during this process. The Vermilion Bird didn't find what it was looking for, and for some reason, it suddenly turned towards Su Xiaolan with rage and hostility on its face. An unexpected battle erupted within the Vermilion Bird trial grounds. Chapter 1473. Su Xiaolan would never have dreamed that she would one day fight with the legendary Vermilion Bird. Little Huang sensed that its master was in danger and came all the way here to save him. Even though the Vermilion Bird's power had been restricted by that special space, it was still not something that Su Xiaolan could contend with. Even the averaged out integration stage, super mythological beast would be no match for it. During that battle, Su Xiaolan had experienced a power that struck despair into her heart. To put it simply, it wasn't a battle at all. It was a one-sided beating. There were a few times where she was on the brink of death, if not for Goldie continuously using its body to block the attacks of the holy flames. She, who was the most proficient in using fire, would have been burned alive by the holy flames. It was also during this battle that little Huang swallowed enough holy vermilion flames to return to the Tao integration stage. The roar of the phoenix startled the 9 heavens. Then, the Vermilion Bird holy beast continued to beat him up. This situation lasted for an entire day and night. One day later, Su Xiaolan had inexplicably obtained the Vermilion Bird's approval. Perhaps it was because of her indomitable will to fight, or perhaps it was because of her peerless fire attribute talent, or perhaps it was because of the nearly perfect Vermilion Bird bloodline in her body. In any case, the battle had ended just like that. Sect leader Zhu Shuza had already made up his mind to use his sect weapon against the Vermilion Bird, but when he arrived at the Vermilion Bird trial grounds, he discovered that Su Xiaolan, the Phoenix, and the Vermilion Bird were happily discussing Tao with one another. He had once suspected that there was something wrong with the way he had entered the mystic realm. During that Tao discussion, Su Xiaolan had received a lot of inspiration. She had a deeper understanding of the Tao of the vermilion bird, and her control over fire had improved by leaps and bounds. Not only that, but she'd actually become the holy beast vermilion bird's designated successor, and she'd been bestowed the vermilion bird divine talisman and vermilion bird ring. The vermilion bird ring had been forcibly taken from Mo Hai's hand. It was originally the vermilion bird holy beast legacy item. Then, Su Xiaolan officially became the sole successor of the holy vermilion bird under the dumbstruck eyes of all the disciples and elders of the vermilion bird sect. Even Su Xiaolan herself found all of this extremely surreal and dreamlike. But it really did happen. Why me? Su Xiaolan could not help but ask. When Vermilion Bird heard this, an extremely human-like expression of melancholy appeared on her face for the first time. It looked up at the sky and sighed faintly. It seemed to be a loss, but it also seemed to be relieved. With a flap of its wings, it disappeared from this world. The Vermilion Bird came with a bang, and when he left, he was also very decisive. He didn't even bother to say goodbye. He was extremely carefree and arrogant. Su Xiaolan didn't get the answer in the end. However, this incident made her the undisputed #1 successor to the Vermilion Bird sect leader. Su Xiaolan's life didn't change because of this. The 4-9 Immortal sect was currently being managed by Su Xiaolan, and she wasn't interested in the Vermilion Bird sect, which was also one of the 5 great sections. Day after day, she continued to cultivate, teach her disciples, fight Goldie, participate in the war, and wait for Enlin. Training, teaching disciples, fighting Goldie, participating in the war, waiting for Enlin, of course. After receiving the Vermilion Bird's acknowledgement and inheritance, she immediately traveled to the border of the opposite shore realm to inform Enlin of this good news. Friends, beast pets, disciples, servants, all of them came and went. They had all spoken to Enlin on a massive crater in the opposite shore realm, and they often accompanied Su Xiaolan as they waited for that person who would most likely never return. However, as the war became more and more intense, many of them were forbidden by Su Xiaolan for safety reasons, as it was simply too dangerous. Of course, waiting for Enlin was still an integral part of Su Xiaolan's daily life. She would sneak over to Enlin and stand beside a withered tree for 2 hours. Before she left, she would place a restriction in front of the door to protect the only cabin on the frozen plains. The 80th year after Enlin's disappearance, Su Xiaolan came to the holy glacial lands to take her final step. She had already reached the pinnacle of the true dragon and vermilion bird Daos. She was going to fuse the 2 powers of the divine Tao together and embark on an unprecedented path of Tao integration. Her experience of Tao integration was very similar to Senior Xin Yin's experience of fusing the true dragon and phoenix Daos together. However, Shen Yin had ultimately failed in the process of Tao integration, and she had perished as well. Su Xiaolan received Shen Yin's inheritance, and it was as if a reincarnation cycle had reappeared in a different time and space on this path of Tao integration. She had Shen Yin's experience of Tao integration as well as her own understanding of Tao integration. She wasn't just going to fuse the 2 divine Taos together to create a new Tao. What she was going to do was to make the Tao of the true dragon and the Tao of the vermilion bird intertwine with each other in a helix manner, so that they were both connected and independent. She was going to use the Tao of the true dragon as the guardian and the Tao of the vermilion bird as the main. This was a completely new method of Tao integration. In other words, if others wanted a Tao integration, they would obtain one type of power of the divine Tao. However, if Su Xiaolan were to successfully Tao integration, she would obtain 2 completely different powers of the divine Tao. This was no longer a simple addition. This was an absolutely unprecedented and groundbreaking feat that was even more ridiculous than Shen Yin's creation of a brand new divine Tao. On that day, a vermilion bird over 100,000 feet in length soared into the sky, scattering fiery feathers that decorated heaven and earth like flower petals. The holy glacial lands, which had been sealed in ice for hundreds of millions of years, were bathed in scorching summer flames. A true dragon roared and swam through the air, sweeping up the winds and clouds for thousands of kilometers. No living being knew who was undergoing Tao integration. Some mighty figures could sense something, but when they arrived at the location of Tao integration, they would only be greeted by the sight of a vast expanse of ravaged land. The Tao integration cultivator had already disappeared. Perhaps he had already perished, or perhaps he had already gone into seclusion. No one knew that a green figure had already arrived at the vast and lonely holy glacial lands. She looked up into the sky and announced the joyous news of her Tao integration success with a smile on her face. She was going to share this joyous news with Enlin as soon as possible. That's right. She hoped that Enlin would be the first person to know about this. Even though no one replied to her, her smile was still as warm as the sun, capable of melting 10,000 years of ice and snow. Su Xiaolan had become a hidden trump card of the 4-9 Immortal sect after her Tao integration. The heavenly human tribe and sinister spirit beast cesspool armies on the northern front had broken through the holy paradise and heavenly paradise's defensive lines and plunged into the wind plain state of the kingdom of the 9 states like a sharp knife. A goddess descended from the sky on a phoenix with more than 10,000 cultivators who had been mobilized in a hurry. They managed to block the army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, including a divine beast and 2 Tianqi marshals, outside of the Wind Plain state. Su Xiaolan rose to fame during this battle and was revered as the divine Phoenix Maiden. The power displayed by the 4-9 Immortal sect was also becoming more and more astonishing to the world. A Tao integration stage battleship, Xiao Tu, Xiao Zhe, the divine Phoenix Maiden, and the Phoenix for Tao integration stage mighty figures, and a sect of return to void stage and soul formation stage cultivators as dazzling as the stars in the sky. A sect of this scale had become the publicly acknowledged leader of the 5 great sects of the kingdom of the 9 states. Su Xiaolan received all types of accolades and was revered by countless living beings. However, her life was still as simple as ever. Cultivating, teaching disciples, beating up little Huang, participating in battles, waiting for Enlin. Cultivating, teaching disciples, beating up little Huang, participating in battles, waiting for Enlin, until one day, she finally saw Enlin. That was the end of the story. Enlin listened to Xiaolan's 100 years. It was a very, very long story. He listened for a very, very long time. He didn't want to miss out on any of the details. It was as if he was listening, remembering, and imagining he would be able to make up for the 100 years that he had missed out on in Su Xiaolan's life. However, it was also at this moment that Enlin came to a sudden realization. He had been absent for an entire 100 years, but at the same time, he was never absent. That's right. Everything that happened to Su Xiaolan would be recounted to him at the place where he had disappeared. Su Xiaolan waited for Enlin every single day. Enlin's shadow could be seen in her life. He had never been absent for 100 years. Enlin had lived in her heart for 100 years. Chapter 1474. Enlin was extremely touched, but at the same time, he felt extremely guilty. He felt like he owed Su Xiaolan far too much. He had waited for an entire 100 years. Furthermore, he had waited for an entire 100 years when most people thought that he had already perished. What kind of emotion and conviction did this require? In particular, a stunning goddess like Su Xiaolan must have had countless admirers, but she had never even looked at any of them. Oh, that's right, she didn't like him either. After all, there was no other man as outstanding as him in the kingdom of the 9 states. Water cannot be compared to the ocean. Clouds cannot be compared to Mount Wu. Looking back at the flowers, half fate is to cultivate, half fate is to be a lord. Enlin couldn't help but recite a poem in his heart. How was he supposed to repay such an infatuated woman? Enlin really didn't know how to repay Su Xiaolan. The only thing he could think of was to repay her with his body. He was just about to express his feelings when Su Xiaolan asked him about his past. Enlin thought for a moment before heaving a forlorn sigh. He could only recount his painful past. So on so forth, so on so forth. Su Xiaolan listened with rapt attention. She was astonished when she heard that the rate of cultivation in that strange space was several hundred times faster than in the outside world. She was even more astonished when she heard that a day in that space was equivalent to a year in the outside world. When she heard that Lin and Xiao Chao had been tortured, tears began to flow from her eyes, and she couldn't help but hug the man before her tightly. And Lin buried his head in Su Xiaolan's chest and sobbed uncontrollably as he breathed in her fragrance. 4-9 Immortal Sect. This was the most powerful sect in the Kingdom of the Nine States. It was situated on an extremely vast grassland. There was an abundance of spiritual energy here, and all types of exotic flowers and plants grew here. Even extremely rare and precious spirit-rank treasures could be found here. However, not a single living being dared to take any spirit-rank treasures, even though there were no guards here. There was no other reason than the fact that this place had already become the territory of the 4-9 Immortal Sect. The 4-9 Immortal Sect was the leader of the 5 super-immortal sects and a number 1 sect in the Kingdom of the Nine States aside from the Celestial Court. Unless a cultivator was tired of living, no one would dare to steal from such a place. The sacred grounds of the sect sat at the center of the grassland. Immortal mist coiled around it while rays of light covered the sky. When looked at from afar, it was like the most ethereal and divine pearl in the heavens and the earth. Apparently, there were less than 10,000 core disciples in the 4-9 Immortal Sect, but all of them were extraordinarily talented and interesting. They didn't put on any airs and treated others like a spring breeze. Some were forthright, some were uninhibited. Of course, there were also some who were obedient and shy. There were all kinds of personalities. In addition, their appearances were also very strange. Some looked like experts, some looked like rough men in the marketplace, and some were mysterious and unfathomable. However, regardless of their personalities and appearances, as long as they were core disciples of the 4-9 Immortal Sect, even the most powerful powers on the entire Tai Chu continent would have to give them some face. This was the current status of the 4-9 Immortal Sect. It had risen to prominence in the past 100 years and was as dazzling as the sun. No power on the Tai Chu continent dared to look down on it regardless of whether it was in terms of its top-notch combat prowess or its vast resources. Setting everything else aside, just any one of its pavilions would be able to scare a lot of people to death. For example, the Peerless Dragon Pavilion had 2 Dao integration stage super mighty figures in one pavilion. For example, the Flame Pavilion had only a dozen or so members, but the pavilion leader was the Dao integration stage Divine Phoenix Maiden. Her steed was a Dao integration stage mythological beast phoenix. So who would dare to mess with her? For example, the Purple Star Pavilion possessed a Dao integration stage weapon of mass destruction. Not only was the Starfire battleship unrivaled, but all of its advanced technology struck fear into the hearts of all living beings on the continent. Sometimes, enemies wouldn't even get to see the pavilion before they were blasted into oblivion. For example, the mysterious and unfathomable Realm Pavilion. No one had been able to keep track of how many powerful beings there were in the Realm Pavilion. All they knew was that all of the powerful beings that emerged from the Realm Pavilion were very unfamiliar, and they were extremely powerful and had an endless supply of them. For example, the Snow Pavilion, which had the most beautiful women in the entire continent. The Snow Maidens had all been recruited by the 4-9 Immortal Sect, so their combat prowess was extremely fearsome. For example, the Blood Pavilion, which was also known as the Little Dark Marshlands. Even though their Dao integration stage super mighty figures couldn't compare to the Dark Marshlands, their return to Void stage mighty figures were more than enough to crush the Dark Marshlands. There were even people who claimed that as long as the Blood Tribe Emperors didn't intervene, the Blood Pavilion would be able to raise the Dark Marshlands to the ground. This was definitely not an exaggeration. Within the Blood Pavilion, there were a total of 8 mighty figures at the Return to Void Pinnacle stage. Tobias, Cassidy, Merlin, Blair, Jean Ling, Jean Yao, Ada, and Jesse. Which one of them wasn't a powerful being who was renowned across the entire continent? Apparently, the pavilion leader of the Blood Pavilion, Tobias, was showing signs of progressing to the Tao integration stage. As for the other pavilions, they were also thriving, and they were most likely going to perform even more spectacularly in the near future. Right now, war had swept across the entire Tai-Chu continent. The human race was on the brink of extinction, and the rise of the 4-9 Immortal sect had undoubtedly given the human race and the heaven-crushing sect new hope. That's right, the human race needed a hero in this war. The Celestial Court was the final bastion of faith for the people, and the 4-9 Immortal sect was a hero who brought them boundless hope. The rate at which the 4-9 Immortal sect was progressing was simply far too fast, and they could see hope in their immeasurable potential. However, it was precisely such a sect that was filled with legendary colors. The position of sect leader was still vacant. It wasn't that it was vacant, but it had always belonged to that man, the man who had created countless legends 100 years ago. That man was already dead, but he still held the position of sect leader. The divine Phoenix Maiden was only a representative of the sect, not the true sect leader. Most living beings were unable to comprehend this situation. Some people felt like the 4-9 Immortal sect was unwilling to face reality, while others felt like the 4-9 Immortal sect was blindly worshipping the sect. In any case, they felt like there was no need for the 4-9 Immortal sect to remain vacant. They needed a true hero to sit on that throne and lead them into battle. Among the prodigies of the 4-9 Immortal sect, the person who everyone wanted the most to ascend to the position of sect leader was none other than the divine Phoenix Maiden, Su Xiaolan. In terms of aptitude, she had reached the Tao integration stage within 100 years, and no one in the Kingdom of the Nine States could compare to her. In terms of power, she was definitely the #1 female cultivator in the Kingdom of the Nine States. In terms of battle record, she was the #1 goddess of slaughter in the Kingdom of the Nine States. Over the past few decades, she had slain over 1 million powerful beings. Most importantly, after her Tao integration stage appearance, she was riding atop a mythological beast, a phoenix, and everyone was extremely envious of her. It could be said that she was the #1 cultivator in the Kingdom of the Nine States in terms of glamour and image. With so much glory, if Su Xiaolan were to officially become the sect leader of the 4-9 Immortal sect, no one in the Kingdom of the Nine States would object. However, she had vetoed all of this. Right now, Su Xiaolan was holding the hand of the true sect leader of the 4-9 Immortal sect as they hurried toward the sect. Chapter 1475. At the 4-9 Immortal sect, a pair of majestic divine pillars stood on either side of the gate. There was a plaque in the air with the words 4-9 engraved upon it. The words were shimmering with light and vibrant colors, and they seemed to be imbued with a transcendent power that could pierce through all things. There seemed to be a new core disciple joining the 4-9 Immortal sect. Sun Yulao was currently leading a dozen or so newbie disciples on a tour of the 4-9 Immortal sect. Sun Yulao was an extremely renowned sword immortal among the younger generation of the Kingdom of the Nine States. He had already reached the return to void stage at such a young age, and he possessed the Blue Dream ancient sword, which had nurtured spirit. Countless cultivators were envious and revered him both in terms of power and potential. A group of core disciples surrounded Sun Yulao and chattered among themselves. Sun Yulao pointed at the plaque with a smile. The words on this plaque were written by the #1 adorable pet of the 4-9 Immortal sect, Master Shui Zhantian, and they are imbued with a lofty, intent realm of defiance against fate. Oh! All of the newbie disciples let loose cries of surprise. So it was written by the adorable and ferocious Shui Zhantian? That's awesome. A female disciple stared at the plaque with reverence and anticipation in her eyes. She had only seen Shui Zhantian in the newspaper, but she had never seen him in real life. She really wanted to hug that adorable pet soon. However, he was an elder of the sect, while she was only a disciple. The disparity between the two of them struck her with fear. After all, the disparity between their statuses was simply too vast. Wouldn't it be inappropriate for a disciple to hug an elder? This was what the female disciple was thinking, but she had already made a wish in her heart. One day, she had to hug Elder Shui Zhantian. Sun Yulua led all of the disciples into the sect. Rich, vital energy enshrouded their bodies as soon as they entered the sect, as if it were cleansing every single corner of their bodies. Their blood also reflexively surged, as if their bodies were filled with energy. Every inch of this land was created by the #1 architect of the Tai Chu continent, the Grandmaster Construction Cultivator and Holy Lord Tianhua, and they were both serious workers. The sect can gather the power of the veins of the earth and the stars on the ground, and the level of vital energy and spiritual aura is at the pinnacle of the kingdom of the 9 states. The natural scenery is spectacular, and there are countless tall and majestic buildings. The 9 Heavens Trial Holy Land is renowned throughout the entire continent. Sun Yulua introduced as he walked. All the newbie disciples exclaimed in surprise and excitement. Apart from wow wow, amazing, and awesome, there were no other words that could describe his current mood. This was the sect of their dreams. Soon, everyone arrived at the drill ground of the 4-9 Immortal Sect. There were mountains, rivers, forests, and lakes within a radius of several dozen kilometers around the drill ground, all of which have been reinforced by special spell formations. Even a return to Void Stage Mighty Figure would find it difficult to break through this landscape. The disciples and elders would usually study their moves and spar in the practice field. Protecting the environment is everyone's responsibility. If someone were to practice in other parts of the sect and blow up a building or a mountain, they would be locked up in the detention room. Look, it's the little white dragon, Sun Shaodai. She really is, as the rumors say, hard and soft at the same time, beautiful and alluring. Even the dragon horns on her head are so cute. A male disciple said excitedly, "That's by Yao from the Man Pavilion, right? In the Fox clan, she's the most beautiful fox woman I've ever seen. I really can't take my eyes off her." Brother, you really have the guts to say such words. Be careful of Elder Chow's stick. My God, I see Blood Prince Merlin. He's so handsome. A female disciple squealed with admiration at the sight of a man who was instructing a disciple in a high-rank body refinement technique. Merlin was one of the 3 holy disciples of the Blood Tribe. He had curly golden hair, a handsome face, and a pair of dangerous crimson eyes. All of this was enough to create a lethal temptation for some women. Sun Yulua merely gave a knowing smile in response to the female disciple's infatuation. Merlin was very handsome, but there were many handsome men in the sect. Xiao Zhe was youthful handsome. Xin Yuancheng was graceful handsome. Ning Rik was ruffian handsome. Chu Ming was intelligent handsome. He was sure that these infatuated female disciples would soon develop an immunity to all kinds of handsome men. The core disciples of the older generation were the best proof of this. When they walked around the continent, whenever they saw someone try to act cool, they would sneer at them and silently curse them for being crooked. There was no helping it. There were all kinds of handsome men in the 4-9 Immortal Sect, so they had developed an immunity to them. After passing through the drill ground, the newbie disciples saw many renowned figures. They couldn't take their eyes off of them. Sun Yulua led them to the center of the drill ground, where a statue stood. The statue was of a man. He wasn't all that handsome. He held an inky black long sword in one hand, and golden lightning revolved around the tips of his fingers on the other. He didn't look like anything special from the statue. However, all of the newbie disciples' expressions shifted slightly. They had studied the history of the 4-9 Immortal Sect, and they knew that this statue belonged to an important figure. Sun Yulua stared at the statue with a melancholic expression, as if he was reminiscing about the past. A smile appeared on his face after a short while. This man is the only person you have to pay your respects to upon entering the sect. He has many legendary feats. He once wreaked havoc in the Blood Tribe Holy Land, defeated representatives of the Heavenly Tao on many occasions, and saved the entire Snow Maiden race. He also has many titles, such as the Tamer of Divine Lightning, the Super Heavenly Lightning God, the Lord of Transcendence, the Celestial Court's Chef God, the Celestial Court's War God, but here he only has one identity, and that is the founder of the 4-9 Immortal Sect, the one and only sect leader of the 4-9 Immortal Sect, sect leader in Lin. All of the disciples looked up at the statue with solemn expressions, and their expressions were either filled with sorrow or reverence. But the only thing that remained constant was the reverence in their hearts. To be able to create such a mighty sect, how could their sect leader be ordinary? With this in mind, all of the disciples extended their bows. Disciple Tao Manman, Meng Wei, Su Siqing, we pay our respects to sect leader and Lin. May the sect leader's spirit in heaven bless our sect forever. I can't say that. Sun Yulong almost screamed with excitement upon hearing this. Do you want to be locked up in a small black room by sect leader Xiaolan? Immediately say that he's in a faraway place. The newbie disciples were frightened and immediately changed their words. May the sect master bless our sect in a faraway place, so that our sect will prosper forever. All of them knew that sect leader and Lin had passed away over 100 years ago, and even the celestial court had held a funeral for him. This was a fact that the 4-9 Immortal sect had always denied. Naturally, they wouldn't say much about this kind of thing. It was fine as long as they knew. Right at this moment, a crisp cry erupted throughout the heavens. The scarlet divine flame streaked across the sky like a river of flowing light as it flew into the distance. A gargantuan figure could be seen within the divine flame. The several hundred disciples on the drill ground all looked up into the sky with excitement in their eyes. It's the phoenix. The phoenix from a mystic realm has appeared again. It rarely moves on its own, so the divine phoenix maiden must have returned. All of the disciples discussed with excitement in their hearts. All of the newbie disciples shuddered upon hearing this, and their expressions became even more excited as they looked up into the sky. They were extremely lucky to have the opportunity to witness the legendary mythological beast, the phoenix, as well as the renowned divine phoenix maiden. Was a number 1 legendary figure of the 4-9 Immortal sect finally going to appear? Chapter 1476. All of the disciples and elders on the drill ground stopped what they were doing. They all raised their heads to look up at the sky in the distance. Everyone knew that the divine phoenix maiden had a phoenix as her steed. The phoenix had come out of its own accord to welcome her, which meant that the stand-in sect leader, Su Xiaolan, had returned. Not only were the people on the drill ground extremely excited, even true nuclear celestial immortal, setting moon celestial immortal, and missing in celestial immortal were all looking into the distance with smiles on their faces. Xiaolan is always full of vital energy after speaking to Enlin, Su Qianyun said with a smile. That's right. She has a heavy burden on her shoulders, and only by talking to Enlin will she be able to do so. Even as friends, we can't really relieve her of that burden. Xian Yuan Cheng heaved a forlorn sigh. Master's wife will be the happiest person in the world when Master returns. Yiling's eyes were filled with determination as she looked into the sky in the distance. This day will definitely come. The sky in the distance had already become a vast expanse of fiery red. The scorching temperatures were gradually rising. The phoenix is coming back. All of the disciples looked up into the sky with nervous expressions. A pair of dazzling crimson wings spread open as flaming feathers danced in the air like flower petals. The regal and awe-inspiring phoenix flew over from the distance with an azure figure on its back. In this world, the only person who had the right to stand on the phoenix's back was that legendary woman. Countless disciples and elders were struck by a sense of awe and veneration upon seeing that figure. All of the newbie disciples looked up into the sky with scorching light in their eyes. The divine phoenix maiden was the stand-in sect leader of the 4-9 Immortal sect. She was the idol of countless female cultivators, and countless male cultivators were infatuated with her, but didn't dare to approach her. She was about to appear before everyone. The phoenix didn't carry the divine phoenix maiden back to the sect leader's pavilion. Instead, it flew toward the drill ground, and it looked like it was going to land on the drill ground. This caused the disciples who were cultivating to be extremely excited, and they immediately took the initiative to vacate a piece of empty space. The flames on the phoenix's body began to dissipate, revealing a perfectly proportioned body that glowed with divine light. It was majestic and incomparably beautiful. However, at this moment, Everyone's gazes turned to its back. After the flames dissipated, the figure began to become clear. Is she the divine phoenix maiden? It's so beautiful. Something's not right. Why are there two people? Hiss. It's true. When the disciples looked at their acting sect master with reverence, they suddenly realized that there was also a white figure beside her. Following that, an extremely shocking scene appeared. The divine maiden, who was hailed as the #1 female cultivator in the Kingdom of the 9 States, was currently holding onto a man's arm with a sweet smile on her face. It wasn't just the disciples who had never seen such a scene before. Even the elders present had never seen the goddess in such a state. This, our acting sect master, is actually holding a man's arm. The divine phoenix maiden has someone she likes? Impossible. The divine phoenix maiden is a supremely talented woman, who in the Kingdom of the 9 States is worthy of her. Everyone stared at the scenes unfolding before their eyes with shock and confusion, as if their eyes were playing tricks on them. The undisputed #1 goddess in the hearts of countless people, the otherworldly goddess, was now holding another man's hand intimately. There was a gentleness on her flawless face that had never appeared before. This scene was simply too shocking. Wait, why does he look so familiar? A newbie disciple rubbed his eyes as he looked at the statue beside him, then at the man standing not far away. And Sun Yulua's mouth gaped open, and his mind was in a complete mess as he stuttered. There are a lot of new faces here. The white-robed man leaped down from the phoenix's back with a warm smile on his face. The divine phoenix maiden followed behind him with a dainty smile, and she held onto the man's arm in a very natural manner while pointing at the statue with her other hand. This is the statue I carved for you. What do you think? TSK, TSK, TSK. Are you ugly? I feel like I should be even more handsome. Su Xiaolan glared at the man with a disdainful expression. Shameless. The two of them continued to flirt with one another. All of the surrounding disciples were completely dumbstruck and deathly silent. Only then did the man realize that something was amiss, and he turned to all of the disciples with a smile. Hello, everyone. I've discovered many new disciples. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Sorta Mortal and Lin. A heart-wrenching roar erupted. Tears flowed from Sun Yulua's eyes as he pounced toward Lin and held him tightly in a bear hug. This real touch, it's real, it's really real. You really are Lin. Wah! Tears flowed from Sun Yulua's eyes as he held onto Lin tightly, as if he was afraid that Lin would ascend to heaven if he were to let go. At this moment, Sun Yulua was completely devoid of the graceful sword immortal persona that he had displayed to all of the new disciples. Instead, he was bawling like a child who weighed several hundred kilograms. Su Xiaolan's expression darkened as she stared at the man who was holding onto her Dao partner. She really wanted to burn him to ashes. However, before she had a chance to do anything, Sun Yulua was kicked aside by a black boot. A pleasant voice that was imbued with boundless yearning sounded, "Master." And Lin felt the burly man in his arms fly away amid a wail of anguish. Immediately afterward, a fragrant scent wafted toward him, following which a soft and exquisite body crashed into his chest. This was a woman in a tight-fitting black Taoist robe with tears shimmering in her eyes. She had her arms around Lin, and she leaned her head against his chest as she burst into tears. It really is you. You're finally back, little Ling. And Lin's hands were trembling slightly as he gently patted her back. He felt as if he had been transported back to 100 years ago, when he would walk around the sect with this little girl in his arms. Su Qinyun and Xinyuan Cheng also flew over, and they stared at the scenes unfolding before their eyes with incredulity in their eyes. Xiaolan, can I hug Lin? Su Qinyun asked with a blank expression. Go ahead. Su Xiaolan smiled. Su Qinyun made her way over to Lin before giving him a tight hug. It really isn't Lin. This feeling is real. It's not an illusion. Xinyuan Cheng also made his way over to hug Lin. He was very healthy and fit. Boom, 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 boom. Beams of light soared into the sky from the 4-9 Immortal Sect. Big Brother and Woof. Master. Holy Leader. Sect Leader and Lin. One sect mighty figure after another began to appear before flying toward the drill ground in a frenzy. All of the newbie disciples were astonished by this scene. They only wanted to see a statue of their sect leader. Was there really a need to show them a real sect leader? What happened to his spirit in heaven? So, some of the disciples murmured to themselves at the sight of the man, surrounded by all of the mighty figures. Our sect leader is back. Chapter 1477. All of the 4-9 immortal sect disciples present witnessed an unforgettable scene. This was the happiest smile they had ever seen on the pavilion lords and elders' faces, and it was also the time they had seen the pavilion lords and elders cry the loudest. Of course, they were crying tears of joy. In any case, this was an unforgettable scene. Even Pavilion Lord Bai Ling, who had always appeared to everyone as an icy beauty, was like a snow lotus in full bloom as an extremely enticing smile blossomed on her face. Everyone gathered around Lin to exchange pleasantries and hug him. There was only one topic of discussion. You didn't have King die? That's right. No one wanted Lin to die. But the Celestial Court had already held a funeral, so everyone thought that Lin had been blown to smithereens by the heavenly time god's self-detonation. Even the snow maidens who had witnessed the event had said the same thing. Furthermore, there had been no news of Lin for the past 100 years, so everyone thought that he was already dead. No one would have thought that. On this day, Su Xiaolan returned with Lin in her arms with an elated expression on her face. This was simply a pleasant surprise, as if he had come back from the dead. At this moment, Lin received the most hugs and the most astonishment. They all wanted to confirm whether this was the real Lin through hugs. Big brother and what kind of dog do I like? Woof. Dabai pounced on Lin. You only like beautiful women with fair skin. And Lin snapped. Dabai chuckled. This is the real big brother and woof. Master, what do I like to do the most? Xiaohong asked in her sweet voice. You like to bask in the sun, and Lin replied truthfully. Master is the real one. Xiaohong also wagged her head from side to side with elation. Tina flew over and gave Lin an excited hug as she stared at him with her emerald eyes. Master, how many golden realm essence crystals do you owe little Na? Do I owe you anything? Wah, this master is clearly a fake. Tina had a mental breakdown. Why do I feel that this isn't Lin's true colors? That's just how despicable he is, Lu Qianhuan said with a smile as she stood off to the side with her sword in her arms. Everyone used their own methods to confirm that this was the real Lin and not a fake. The 4-9 immortal sect instantly exploded. The atmosphere reached an unprecedented climax. The news spread like wildfire to every corner of the sect in an instant. All of the 4-9 immortal sect members were made aware of one thing, and that was that their sect leader, Lin, who had disappeared for 100 years and died for 100 years, had returned today. Unprecedented shock, unprecedented joy. If it weren't for the fact that Su Xiaolan had done everything in her power to keep the news of Lin's return a secret within the 4-9 immortal sect, it was very likely that this news would have spread throughout the entire Tai Chu continent within a day. The tens of thousands of core disciples in the sect were in a daze. The legend that they once worshipped the most, the spirit in heaven that they once prayed to protect in their hearts, the eternal immortality that they once said many times, their most respected and beloved Lord Sovereign. Now, he really had come back to life. The sound of firecrackers suddenly erupted within the sect. Fireworks exploded in the sky, creating a dazzling display of colors. Countless beautiful flowers blossomed on the ground, covering every corner of the sect. There was even a red carpet that extended from the drill ground all the way to the main conference chamber. This was a path that had been set up specifically for the Lord Sovereign. The massive sect was transformed into a sea of celebration in a very short time. There was simply too much to say to one another when friends met. And Lin made his way to the main conference chamber, where he planned to recount everything that had happened during this period of time to everyone. Su Xiaolan held onto Lin's arm with a blissful smile on her face. After 100 years of waiting, the clouds had finally parted. Her heart was filled with a rainbow at this moment. All of the disciples on the drill ground sighed with emotion as they looked at the man who was being escorted into the distance by all of the elders and pavilion lords. They finally understood why Su Xiaolan had always refused to become the sect leader, and why she had persisted for 100 years. In the 4-9 Immortal sect, there was only one person who held the most prestige and was able to garner the respect of all of the pavilion lords, and that was their sect leader, Enlin. All of the newbie disciples were also sighing with emotion when someone suddenly discovered that something was amiss. Where's Brother Sun, who was responsible for showing us around the new sect? A female disciple asked with a confused expression. A male disciple pointed in the direction of Enlin. He seems to have left with Enlin. It's as if he doesn't care about anything and only has eyes for sect leader Enlin. Another male disciple paused momentarily before asking, "So you're saying that we've been abandoned?" Everyone suddenly fell silent. No one answered. The naked reality was a bit cruel. "What do we do now?" a female disciple asked with a pitiable expression after a long while. Another long period of silence ensued. Even Sun Yuluo had disappeared, and they were in complete despair. Meanwhile, on the way to the conference chamber, "Big Brotherin, I'm already returned to Void Stage Dog now. I've also received the title of White Wind Divine Dog, Woof." Dabai looked at Enlin with a smug expression as he wagged his snowy white tail. The advancement of the realm did not change its cute and wretched appearance. It could not raise its level of coolness. Master, Little Ling is also very powerful now. I'm also a return to Void Stage super mighty figure." Yi Ling hurriedly spoke as if she was afraid that she would receive too little praise. She didn't forget to glance at Dabai as she spoke, as she latched onto Enlin's sleeve. At this moment, this goddess of death, for the first time, revealed the appearance of a little girl using Do Chi. "I've heard about all of you from Xiaolan. I have to say, all of you are very powerful." Enlin couldn't help but sigh with emotion as he patted Yi Ling's head with a faint smile. "Especially you, missing in Celestial Immortal. You are a top prodigy of the new generation in the Celestial Court and even the Kingdom of the Nine States." Yi Ling blushed with embarrassment after having her title exposed by Enlin, and she stammered, I, because Master gave me a new life, and I don't want to forget about Master." "Why are you saying that?" Enlin flicked Yi Ling's forehead with a smile. "That's a nice name. You can use this down name from now on." Yi Ling raised her eyebrows, and her eyes shimmered as if she had gone through countless emotions. She nodded with a resolute expression. "That's right. Then I'll still be missing in Celestial Immortal." She had originally chosen this Dao name to commemorate Enlin, but now that Enlin had returned, she could continue to use this Dao name. Who said that she couldn't use this Dao name anymore? After entering the conference chamber, Enlin looked at his beast pets, friends, and servants with a forlorn expression. He hadn't seen them for 100 days, and everyone had changed so much. Unbeknownst to him, everyone else was looking at him with even more forlorn expressions. After all, they hadn't seen each other for 100 years. Enlin looked around and was a little confused. Where are Xiao Zhe, Xiao Chou, and the others? Why doesn't everyone seem to be here? Chapter 1478. Su Xiaolan immediately provided an explanation upon hearing Enlin's words. "They're all defending the border of the Kingdom of the Nine States. We've only just returned from a mission, and that's why we're here at the 4-9 Immortal Sect." Enlin felt like the war was going to be even more intense than he had imagined upon hearing this. Xiao Zhe and Xiao Tu are the two most powerful beings in our 4-9 Immortal Sect. They're stationed at the ancient Void State with many powerful beings from the Dragon Pavilion, and they're facing the most direct attacks from the Heavenly Human Tribe on the Eastern Front, Su Xiaolan explained. There were almost no powers on the Eastern Front that could cooperate with the Kingdom of the Nine States to stop the Heavenly Human Tribe, so most of the 4-9 Immortal Sect forces were deployed on the Eastern Front. "Holy Leader, our Blood Pavilion is responsible for guarding the Southern Front, and they've been working very hard. How about you give us some holy blood so we'll be more motivated?" Cassidy's voice was mellow as she stared intently at Enlin. "My blood is poisonous, and only return to Void final stage mighty figures can handle it." Don't drink it, and Lin cautioned. If such powerful blood tribe cultivators were to commit suicide from drinking his blood, then they would be screwed. Don't worry, at least half of the blood pavilion can drink your blood now. Me, Merlin, Tobias, Ada, Jean Ling, Jean Yao, Bryce, Jesse. Cassidy spoke with a smile. That's awesome, and Lin praised from the bottom of his heart. All of the Blood Pavilion members were at the return of Void Intermediate Stage or above, and there were 8 at the return to Void Pinnacle Stage. A vibrant smile appeared on Cassidy's face upon hearing in Lin's praise. If it weren't for the fact that Su Xiaolan was still beside her, she actually wanted to wrap her arms around the holy leader's neck and have a good chat with her. After all, she had improved so much during these past few years, so shouldn't the holy leader reward her a little? And Lin was very grateful toward these loyal blood tribe servants who had disappeared for 100 years, and he immediately gave Cassidy a small vial of blood. It's been 100 years. I've waited for 10 years, and I've been lost and in darkness. Cassidy's body trembled as tears welled up in her eyes, and she began to sob uncontrollably. Thank God I didn't give up. The corner of Lin's mouth twitched slightly. Those who didn't know better would think that this scene was very touching, but he knew that at least half of it was because of the blood in the bottle. Our realm pavilion is also responsible for guarding the southern front, so we have no issues with our manpower and combat power. Let's fight a war of attrition and exhaust them to death. And Lin nodded slightly. The Divine Mirror World was the foundation of the realm pavilion, which meant that they were using the foundation of an entire world to fight against the realm pavilion. The Divine Mirror World was showing more and more signs of becoming a high-rank world. Ever since the Realm Core had become complete, it had been developing at an even better rate. It was like a vibrant young man, and its population and power were both rapidly increasing. 100 years was the time of the Tai Chu continent. Tina could still accelerate time in the Divine Mirror World. Even though the amount of time acceleration she could do so was getting smaller and smaller, over 1,000 years had already passed in the Divine Mirror World, and there were already top-rate prodigies who had attained the Divine Tao. And Lin speculated that once a living being reached the Tao integration stage, the Divine Mirror World would definitely undergo an earth-shattering transformation. A faint smile appeared on Bai Ling's face as she looked at Lin. Our Purple Star Pavilion is responsible for guarding the central front line against the heavenly human tribe in the White Nectar Sea. The only things we're lacking are materials and energy resources. As long as we have enough resources, we can raise the heavenly human tribe to the ground. Big Sister Bai's words were very domineering, but no one felt like there was anything wrong with them. At the very least, all enemies below the Tao integration stage and Heaven Pioneer stage were no longer enemies in her eyes. The Flame Pavilion and Spirit Pavilion were responsible for defending the northern front against the heavenly human tribe. With Su Xiaolan and the Phoenix present, the heavenly human tribe wouldn't be able to do anything to her unless they deployed a divine heaven stage super mighty figure. Our Moon Pavilion is mainly composed of pill refinement masters from the Moon Palace. They're responsible for concocting medicines and healing wounds. Su Qianyun spoke in a mellow voice, completely devoid of the authority that a pavilion leader should possess. And Lin took a glance at Su Qianyun, but he wasn't fooled by her outward appearance. He knew that this seemingly harmless little girl would transform into the most ruthless and merciless moonlight assassin at night, reaping lives as if they were nothing more than weeds. The Moon Pavilion was responsible for logistics, and there were many beautiful celestial maidens among them. However, the most adorable pavilion leader was a god of slaughter. This was quite an adorable combination. Immediately afterward, Xin Yuan Cheng's Spirit Pavilion, Dabai's Beast Pavilion, Little Lang's Man Pavilion, and Lu Qianwan's Sword Pavilion also explained their roles. What was worth mentioning was that the Snow Pavilion, which was comprised of the entire Snow Maiden race, had all rushed to the front lines of the Gem State to fight against the Blood Tribe army. They had already confirmed that Lin was dead, but not only had they fulfilled their promise not to harm the human race, they had even joined the human race without any hesitation. And Lin was very surprised by her actions, but he was also very touched. The Snow Maiden's loyalty and righteousness had also greatly improved the impression the humans of the Kingdom of the Nine States had of them. At the very least, they weren't doing anything to discredit the Snow Maidens. In fact, they were wondering if the Snow Maidens were treating them too well. Lin could actually understand how the Snow Maidens thought. After interacting with Shangguan Yi, he knew that even though the Snow Maidens were generally cold and aloof, their hearts were as clear as ice, and they were a race that could clearly distinguish between kindness and hatred. And Lin had sacrificed his life in exchange for the survival of their entire race, so they could also use their lives to repay Lin's debt. The sect leader who had returned after 100 years had finally sorted out the entire sect. Immediately afterward, all of the pavilion leaders and elders looked on with anticipation in their eyes. Lin recounted his experiences. All of them were astonished when they heard about the heavenly time, God self-detonating and entering a strange space. They were even more incredulous when they heard that one day in there was equivalent to 1 year in the outside world. Only Tina had a thoughtful expression on her face. When she heard about Lin's experiences as a blade of grass, she was on the verge of tears. Tears welled up in Lin's eyes, and he was struck by the urge to cry every time he recounted this unbearable experience. He was just about to continue sobbing in Xiaolan's arms. A white furry body pulled him into an embrace. "Big brother, and it's all right. You still have me, woof." Dabai hugged Lin with a sympathetic expression. He recalled the painful experience of being a dog for the rest of his life during Bai Ling's trial. It looked like his experiences were nothing compared to Lin's experiences as a blade of grass. Lin had no choice but to lie in Dabai's arms and sob. Meanwhile, on the floating continent of the Celestial Court, on the Celestial Arch Palace, the Celestial Arch had snuck back. He learned that all of the mighty figures of the Celestial Court, including the 4 emperors, had joined the Heaven-Crushing Sect. As the second-in-command of the Heaven-Mending Sect, he felt like the world had played a huge joke on him. He woke up to find that all of his friends and comrades had joined the enemy's side, leaving him alone. What the hell was going on? The Celestial Arch was very aggrieved, and he began to sob in a corner. Chapter 1479. Outside the Kingdom of the Nine States, deep within the Purple Star ruins. This was once the core region of the Purple Star civilization, as well as the most glorious and dazzling place on the entire Taichu continent. However, it had now been cursed by heaven and earth, leaving it barren and filled with a deathly aura. No one dared to trespass there. Even if they were a return to Void Stage mighty figure, their bodies would rot and their Tao foundations would crumble if they weren't careful. However, in this desolate wasteland, there was a land of light that emitted a pure white light, without a single speck of dust. Countless statues of ancient beasts stood on both sides of the land of light. At the end of the ferocious beast statues was a white hall. Its entire body was sparkling and translucent, looking holy and flawless. The only thing that was out of place was the countless cracks on its dome, like a piece of glass that could shatter at any time. This was the base of the Heaven-Crushing Sect, the land of eternal light. Many returned to Void Stage mighty figures had cultivated peculiar spell techniques on the Land of Light, and all of their attacks were imbued with the power to pierce through the heavens, as if they were sharp sabers that were going to slice through all things. These experts would all be overlords on the continent, but here they were merely ordinary combatants. While training, the combatants would look longingly at a palace on the ground of light from time to time. They knew that the one sitting on the throne in the main hall was the truly terrifying big shot, and to have the opportunity to hold a post in the main hall was a supreme honor. Neza, stop running around. You haven't even finished practicing your Heaven Piercer yet. His heaven-crushing true intent hasn't even reached the required standard. A middle-aged man carrying a pagoda yelled as he chased after a youth. Rumble. He had no choice but to use the pagoda crushes the heavens to press the youth under the pagoda. Let me go. I've been practicing this every day. I'm going crazy. Neza kept struggling under the tower. Sigh. The uncle sighed helplessly. His son's aptitude was very good, but he couldn't settle down and always wanted to do other things. Look at the golden couple. look at the 7 fairies. Which one of them isn't more hardworking than you? They were all prodigies of the younger generation, but they had never thought about playing around. All they wanted to do was cultivate heaven-crushing techniques and save the human race. You're the only one who thinks of stirring up trouble every day. What kind of nonsense is that? Heavenly King Li's face was filled with disappointment. He directly told his own child about the difference between him and other children. Neza was still struggling. You're all studying heaven-crushing. Can't you let me take a break? Heavenly King Li ignored him and pointed toward the west. Look at the battling Buddha who was on par with you in the past. He's already at the Tao integration stage, but you're still at the return to void pinnacle stage. He's even mastered a paramount heaven-crushing technique like the finger of the heavenly Tao, yet you're still learning the most basic heaven-crushing spear. Neza, the poor child finally gave up struggling. If he continued to struggle, Heavenly King Li would probably use other people's children to torture him. In other novels, only the protagonist wanted to defy the natural order, but here, everyone in the Kingdom of the 9 States wanted to defy the natural order. All returned to void stage mighty figures were cultivating heaven-crushing techniques. The heavenly Tao was very flustered. Representatives of the heavenly Tao had far fewer opportunities to show themselves in battle than before. This was because as soon as they appeared, they would be captured by a bunch of crazed heaven-crushing, powerful beings to try out the effects of their heaven-crushing techniques. Wasn't it all for this day? In the land of eternal light, aside from a few dozen return to void stage mighty figures who were diligently cultivating heaven-crushing techniques, everyone else was fighting on the front lines to protect the human race. Not only did the heaven-crushing sect have powerful beings from all over the continent, but it also had powerful beings from almost all of the human race. The 4 super-immortal sects, the 4 emperors of the celestial court, the 9 imperials, the human race had no choice but to fight with everything they had. If the celestial court was the pillar of the human race, and the 9 immortal sect was the hero of the human race, then the heaven-crushing sect was the sharpest sword of the human race. The only regrettable thing for the human race was that the 9 immortal sect didn't join the heaven-crushing sect. Due to this, the 9 immortal sect was still the subject of much criticism, while all of the mighty figures were diligently cultivating. A handsome youth in a brownish-yellow linen robe suddenly appeared in the land of eternal light before making his way toward the palace. All of the mighty figures were given a fright upon seeing this. This was a new face that they had never seen before. Who goes there? Heavenly King Li let loose an enraged roar, and the golden pagoda in his hand exuded a vast might as he stared at the youth with a cautious expression. All of the other mighty figures also began to unleash their powers upon seeing this. It was as if they were going to kill the youth if he did anything out of line. It was very likely that this was a member of the heavenly human tribe or a representative of the heavenly Tao. A warm smile appeared on the youth's face as he looked at all of these powerful beings. He didn't display any hostility toward them, and he merely nodded slightly before continuing onward. Everyone didn't even have a chance to react. The door to the only palace in the land of eternal light suddenly swung open. A flawless female in a flowing white dress with translucent skin floated through the air. There was an expression of excitement on her face. Mistress Shuiyan. Najah looked at the female with a hint of reverence and adoration in his eyes. Shuiyan was extremely beautiful. Ever since Najah had first laid eyes on her, he felt as if his heart had been pierced by a spear, and his heart was about to explode. She was ethereal, like a celestial maiden of ice and snow. However, Shuiyan, who had always given Najah this impression, had tears streaming down her face. All of this was because of the man who had just arrived. A sense of foreboding welled up in Najah's heart. All of the powerful beings present were also extremely bewildered. They didn't dare to attack the man who was walking toward them, but they did have some speculations in their minds. Right at this moment, the ancient dragon empress, who was wearing a true dragon emperor robe, also stood outside the door with a wide smile on her face. She was bowing her head slightly, and it looked like she was going to welcome that man. This time, all of the mighty figures present were astonished. The ancient dragon empress was already the second most revered super mighty figure in the heaven-crushing sect. Who was this man who had the right to make her bow to him like this? A man with a demonic horn on his head, a pair of crimson eyes, and a wine gourd hanging from his waist also walked out. He seemed to be very happy to see the man who had just arrived, and he picked up the wine gourd and gulped down a few mouthfuls of strong liquor, as if he was celebrating this event. Many people in the land of eternal light had seen him before, but they didn't know his exact identity. A heaven-crushing sect mighty figure from the older generation had said that he was the heavenly disciples' attendant, and his name was Demon Emperor Cu. He was once the most powerful being in the true demon tribe, but he had changed his appearance after that. Even his cultivation-based fluctuations were only at the soul formation stage, which was extremely strange. Of course, he had never openly admitted to this. Right at this moment, a handsome and graceful man in a red robe walked out. His appearance caused everyone present to fall silent, and some of them even drew a sharp intake of breath. They had only seen this man when they had joined the heaven-crushing sect, but they didn't think that he would personally come out to welcome a single person. This man from the true demon tribe was known to almighty figures above the return to void stage. He was the most powerful being in the true demon tribe, as well as the #1 heavenly disciple of the heaven-crushing sect, Cyril. Cyril looked at the newcomer with a warm smile. Welcome back, our second heavenly disciple, Chun Chun. Chapter 1480. Chun Chun. He's the second heavenly disciple of the heaven-crushing sect, Chun Chun. My God, didn't he perish in battle with the heavenly time god? He's not dead. He's not dead. Several dozen mighty figures in the land of eternal light began to yell with excitement. Chun Chun is not dead? If that's the case, then doesn't that mean Daddy? And in Lin, all of the 7 celestial maidens' eyes lit up at the same time, and their hearts began to stir. However, just as they were about to ask Chun Chun about the situation, he had already been led into the palace by the heavenly disciples, upon which the doors were tightly shut. The doors are closed. We can't go in without permission. A remorseful expression appeared on celestial maiden Tian Xian's face as she cursed herself for not stopping Chun Chun immediately. Don't worry. Let's try to contact Daddy through voice transmission talismans. Celestial maiden Tian Yu immediately tried to contact the celestial arch. However, all of the celestial maidens called several times, but no one picked up, just like in the past 100 years. Could it be that Chun Chun is the only one who managed to escape? Tears welled up in celestial maiden Tian Shou's eyes. What she didn't know was that the celestial arch was sobbing in a corner of the celestial arch pavilion and was in no mood to pick up her voice transmission talisman. Oh, right. We can try to contact Lin. He was on a mission with Daddy. If he's still alive, he might be able to find out where Daddy is. Celestial maiden Tian Yu thought of that be asterisk starred. All of the celestial maidens immediately began to dial in Lin's voice transmission talisman. They were extremely uneasy, and they could even hear each other's nervous heartbeats. At the same time, Lin had just concluded a meeting and was in high spirits, preparing to do something big when his voice transmission talisman lit up. Huh? It's the piggy bank girl's voice transmission talisman? And Lin was extremely excited, thinking that she was going to give him money. He almost picked up the voice transmission talisman, but his hand faltered. No, I'm still a dead man. I still have to take advantage of the information gap between us and the enemy. How can I expose that I'm still alive? And Lin didn't feel like this was the time to expose himself. Even though he didn't think Lin Junjun was a blabbermouth, it was always better to keep his identity a secret. After all, the walls had ears. He thought about it and decided to ignore it. The voice transmission talisman lit up a few times before finally dimming down. In the land of eternal light, the 7 beautiful celestial maidens had tears in their eyes. Their voice transmission talismans were unable to reach them, and they were so sad that they were on the verge of tears. It was a painful feeling of hope being rekindled and then extinguished. Never would Lin, who was far away at the 4-9 Immortal Sect, would have thought that a phone call he couldn't be bothered to pick up would make the 7 celestial maidens cry. At the same time, inside the only palace in the land of eternal light, the heaven-breaking glazed palace. Chun Chun sat on his throne. There were only 4 seats in the entire heaven-crushing glazed palace, and all the other members were standing. Even the Tao integration stage, super mighty figures were no exception. Cyril, Chun Chun, and the ancient dragon empress took their respective seats. The man with a wine gourd around his waist was extremely beautiful, and the 6-winged woman from the Light Wing clan stood beside the 3 emperors like guards. There was another empty seat. It was waiting for someone. Aside from them, there were also 5 other Tao integration stage super mighty figures present. Of course, this wasn't the full strength of the heaven-crushing sect. After all, a large portion of the heaven-crushing sect's forces had already been deployed to the kingdom of the 9 states and the Western Paradise. However, this was also the most powerful force of the heaven-crushing sect, as the heavenly disciples and their servants were all present. Chun Chun, I've always believed that you're still alive. How could a mere heavenly time god kill you? Cyril spoke first with a smile on his face as he looked at Chun Chun. Chun Chun smiled faintly and didn't say anything. His expression was still as calm as ever. It's been a whole 100 years. What on earth have you been through? Shui Yin looked at Chun Chun with a concerned expression. However, her hands didn't stop as she smoothly brewed a pot of hot tea for Chun Chun. The ancient dragon empress, Cyril, and the other Tao integration stage super mighty figures all turned to look at Chun Chun with curiosity on their faces. Chun Chun took a sip of tea. It's been 100 years for you, but it's only been 100 days for me. Everyone erupted into cries of surprise upon hearing this. Immediately afterward, Chun Chun recounted what he had experienced in that strange space. All the living beings exclaimed in astonishment upon hearing this. Cyril also felt like this was quite novel. That space is probably the place closest to the essence of the heavenly Tao, right? You should have spent more time researching there. A day in heaven is a year on earth. I'm afraid that if I spent any more time researching there, the Taichu continent would have disappeared, Chun Chun said in a calm and honest voice. Cyril was left speechless upon hearing this. In reality, there really wasn't much time left for the Taichu continent. However, there's one thing that's not bad. You've obtained Enlin's friendship. Cyril suddenly smiled. A smile appeared on Chun Chun's face upon hearing the mention of Enlin. Indeed, the ancient dragon empress stared at the two of them with a blank expression. She didn't know why they were so happy. Could it be that in comparison to successfully escaping after being trapped for 100 years, Enlin's friendship was more important? Is there something that I don't know about? The ancient dragon empress felt an indescribable sense of injustice as she looked at the happy Cyril and Chun Chun. They were both heavenly disciples, but why was there such a huge disparity between them? She had slain the heavenly speed god and was proficient in most of the heaven-crushing techniques. What secrets did Enlin have that she couldn't know about? With this in mind, she became more and more interested in Enlin. All of a sudden, Chun Chun's voice transmission talisman lit up. He pulled out his voice transmission talisman from his storage ring, and his eyes lit up as an expression of excitement appeared on his face for the first time. It's Enlin. Enlin has contacted me of his own volition. A warm smile appeared on Cyril's face as he looked at the third empty seat, then at the voice transmission talisman in Chun Chun's hand. Hurry up and answer it. The heavens are not to be trusted. If we want to survive, we can only rely on ourselves. Mr. Enlin, you finally thought things through. The true demon beside Cyril chuckled before taking another swig of wine with elation. Chun Chun picked up the voice transmission talisman with a friendly and benevolent expression. Hello, Mr. Enlin. What can I do for you? Is he going to join the heaven-crushing sect? Hello, senior student Chun Chun. Enlin's friendly voice sounded from the other side of the voice transmission talisman. Can you teach our 4-9 immortal sect the techniques of the heaven-crushing sect for the sake of the human race? Chun Chun was elated. Mr. Enlin, I'm very happy that you finally thought things through. The 4-9 immortal sect was an extremely powerful sect. If the 4-9 immortal sect could join them, the heaven-crushing sect would be like a tiger that had grown wings. You thought things through? And Lin was dumbstruck for a moment before coming to a sudden realization. Oh, that's right, I've thought things through. The 4-9 Immortal Sect can only forge a better future with the Heaven-Crushing Sect. Speaking of which, are you going to send a master here to teach our members? Or are we going to the Heaven-Crushing Sect to learn? Since you've already joined the Heaven-Crushing Sect, come to the land of eternal light. You can also get to know the other members of the Heaven-Crushing Sect. Chen smiled. The voice transmission talisman fell silent. I don't think I said I was going to join the Heaven-Crushing Sect, and Lin said in a feeble voice. Chen's expression shifted. Then why did you say you wanted the members of the 4-9 Immortal Sect to learn the Heaven-Crushing techniques? What I meant was, for the sake of the human race, can the Heaven-Crushing Sect teach the mighty figures of our sect the Heaven-Crushing techniques? And Lin paused momentarily before continuing. To put it simply, our 4-9 Immortal Sect would like to learn the spell techniques of your Heaven-Crushing Sect for free. Is that okay? The Heaven-Crushing Glazed Palace fell silent. Chun. Chapter 1481. They had been elated for a long time, and they thought that Lin was going to join the Heaven-Crushing Sect with the 4-9 Immortal Sect. In the end, he just wanted to freeload spells. Chun felt as if a mouthful of blood was stuck in his chest and was about to spurt out. Wasn't that too wishful thinking? Do you think the members of the Heaven-Crushing Sect are retarded? He doesn't even want to join a sect. Yet he wants us to hand over our most important Heaven-Crushing techniques. Who gave him the courage to do so? Senior Chun, can I? It's okay if you can't. I won't force you. Lin's voice came from the voice transmission talisman. It seemed that he was about to hang up. Sure, fellow Taoist and Lin. Chun immediately said, I'm willing. The heaven-breaking glazed palace fell silent again. All of the Tao integration stage mighty figures and heavenly disciple servants were astonished. The ancient dragon empress was even more dumbstruck. What just happened? And Lin successfully hooked up with the Heaven-Crushing Sect for free? Was this still the mysterious and indifferent Emperor Qinshan that they knew? Cyril was the only one who smiled and nodded lightly, as if to say, well done. Haha. Thank you so much, Senior Student Qinshan. I thank you on behalf of the entire 4-9 Immortal Sect and the entire human race. And Lin spoke with excitement. You're welcome. As long as you're happy, Qinshan said. Then who will teach our sect, students? And Lin asked curiously. The ancient dragon empress. She's mastered her heaven-crushing techniques very well, and she's mastered them systematically, so it's very easy to teach. Qinshan smiled. Huh, that dragon princess who shed tears of blood at the slightest provocation? And Lin seemed to be astonished. The ancient dragon empress' face convulsed upon hearing this, but she forced herself to maintain a dignified facade. Yes, that's her. Chun didn't deny it, and then said, if you're not satisfied, I can also personally come to your house to serve you. Ancient dragon empress, Xuan, all the Tao integration stage mighty figures, there's no need. There's no need to trouble Senior Qinshan. I'll listen to your arrangements. And Lin seemed to be very happy. His tone was especially light, as if he didn't realize that there was anything wrong with this method of communication. However, in the eyes of the other super almighties, this conversation was like the collapse of the world and the collapse of their personas. It gave them an indescribable impact. Was this still the Chun they knew? Or was this still the Lin they knew? Chun had actually become so easygoing in front of him. He was the second heavenly disciple of the Heaven-Crushing Sect. The two of them chatted for a while longer before reluctantly hanging up the voice transmission talisman. Chun turned toward the ancient dragon empress with a serious expression. Ancient dragon empress, you have a rather important mission. The ancient dragon empress massaged her brows. All right, I know. He's teaching the 4-9 Immortal Sect the heaven-crushing lineage spell techniques, right? It was easy to talk to smart people. Chun nodded and said, that's right, and don't hold back. Teach them as many as you can. They will be a great help to our plan. The ancient dragon empress looked up at Chun. Can I ask you a question? Who is Lin, and why do all of you hold him in such high regard? Of course, she wasn't asking about the identity that Lin had revealed. Instead, she was asking about the hidden identity that both the first heavenly disciple and the second heavenly disciple held in such high regard. Qinshan fell silent for a moment. All of the Tao integration stage, super mighty figures pricked up their ears nervously. Well, his identity is very special, and even we can't completely glean it. However, Chen hesitated, as if he didn't know whether he should reveal this secret to the ancient Dragon Empress. Let me put it this way. Cyril suddenly interjected. If Enlin agrees to join the heaven-crushing sect and carry out our plan together, then our heaven-crushing sect plan's success rate will more than double. Boom! This sentence exploded in the ancient Dragon Empress' mind like a clap of thunder. She stood there in a daze, his words echoing in her mind. More than double the success rate? That's insane. The ancient Dragon Empress murmured to herself. Although she was still unclear about Enlin's identity, she finally understood Enlin's importance. Thus, recruiting Enlin was indeed an extremely important matter for the heaven-crushing sect. Cyril shook his head with a wry smile and said, "It's a pity that he has to join us willingly. Otherwise, we would have used force a long time ago." A determined expression appeared on the ancient Dragon Emperor's face. "I'm willing to go to the 4-9 Immortal sect and teach them everything I know in order to increase Enlin's impression of us." Qinshan and Cyril nodded in satisfaction. He had grasped the key points so quickly. This child is worth teaching, 4-9 Immortal sect. Enlin, who had ended the voice transmission, had already told the good news to all the core members. He immediately received a wave of 666 and awesome. Without a doubt, this was a piece of great news. All of the powers on the Tai Chu continent had to join the heaven-crushing sect in order to learn the heaven-crushing sect techniques. However, the 4-9 Immortal sect was able to obtain the opportunity to learn the heaven-crushing sect techniques without paying anything at all. Apparently, the heaven-crushing sect's fourth heavenly disciple, the ancient Dragon Empress, had even provided the service to them. Wait, they did have to pay a price. For example, Enlin's face. If it weren't for the fact that this was coming from Enlin's mouth, they would never have believed that such a good thing could happen. It looks like our decision not to join the heaven-crushing sect without the sect leader's consent was a brilliant one. Now we have freedom and spell techniques to learn. This is fantastic. Sun Yulua smiled. There is nothing in this world that the holy leader can't do. An expression of reverence appeared on Cassidy's face. "Xiaolan, do you know how important my face is now?" Enlin chuckled. Su Xiaolan rolled her eyes. "Look at you. Don't fall for their sugar-coated bullets." All right. Do I look like the type of human who would take the bait so easily?" Enlin waved a nonchalant hand. He was in a good mood, and after taking care of this matter, he made his way toward the drill ground. Yi Ling hadn't sparred with her master for a long time, and she was itching to spar with her master. She asked Enlin if she could spar with him. Enlin was not going to refuse such an adorable disciple's request, so he immediately agreed. At the same time, he could empathize with Yi Ling's desire to display the results of her cultivation in front of her master after over 100 years of arduous cultivation. At the 4-9 Immortal sect's largest drill ground, there were already over 1,000 people gathered here. All of them were sect disciples who hadn't participated in the battle, and they were all extremely excited. News of Enlin and Yi Ling sparring had already spread throughout the entire sect. Never in a million years would they have thought that after meeting the legendary sect master, they would have the chance to witness the sect master in action. This was a rare opportunity. They could brag about this for 10 years. The dozen or so newbie disciples who had been forgotten by Sun Yulao were ecstatic. Wow, so the reason why Senior Brother Sun left us here is to let us watch the sect master fight? Thank God we didn't visit the other parts of the sect. We almost missed this opportunity. Senior Brother Sun is far-sighted and has put in a lot of effort. Hurry up, sect leader Enlin is here. Hurry up and get a seat. All of the disciples yelled with excitement at the sight of Enlin in the distance. Chapter 1482. On the drill ground of the 4-9 Immortal sect. Bai Ling snapped her fingers, and a mechanical voice reverberated throughout the drill ground. Material reinforcement, 10,000%. Chaotic cyclone energy absorption barrier activated. 99 extreme heavenly sect protection formation activated. A transparent barrier of light enshrouded the entire drill ground. One buff after another was applied to the drill ground. In order to ensure safety, all of the disciples had retreated from the drill ground to give their sect leader some space to battle. The sun began to set. The light of the setting sun elongated the shadows of the two people on the drill ground. And Lin carried his evil-slaying sword on his back as he looked up at a young woman in a tight-fitting black Taoist robe. Yiling's figure was quite thin, but it was extremely well-proportioned. It could be said that every part of her body was perfect, and she was like a scenic sight even as she stood on the spot. She bowed toward Lin with a smile on her face. Missing in celestial immortal of the 4-9 immortal sect, please enlighten me. Lin smiled and also extended a salute. 4-9 immortal sect, Lin, please enlighten me. After 100 years, the master and disciple once again stood on the training field, welcoming the long-awaited sparring session. Outside the drill ground, all of the disciples had already begun to discuss among themselves. Hey, Dongjun, who do you think is going to win between sect leader Lin and Sister Yiling? Chung Ingxiong asked. The five-tailed female fire fox rolled her eyes. How did you come up with such a retarded question? A light blush appeared on Chung Ingxiong's face. He was only trying to find a topic to talk to Dongjun about, but he didn't think that he would be scolded so mercilessly. It's quite clear that our sect leader is going to win. Is there any doubt about that? Gongshi Chun analyzed with an amused expression. Sister Yiling is extremely talented and is only at the pinnacle of the Return to Void initial stage, but she is already able to unleash power far beyond her cultivation base. However, don't forget that sect leader Lin has once thrashed Return to Void final stage mighty figures at the soul formation stage. Dongjun chimed in. Furthermore, he's able to pummel a Dao integration stage super mighty figure at the Return to Void stage. No matter how powerful Senior Sister is, there's no way she can do that, right? All of the core disciples of the 4-9 Immortal sect were well aware of sect leader Lin's glorious feats. It was precisely because there was a huge mountain like Lin in front of them that these sect geniuses became very humble. They never felt that they were very powerful, and their mentality on the path of seeking Tao had always been neither arrogant nor rash. Little did they know that in the eyes of the cultivators in the outside world, the talents of these sect disciples were monstrous. Some of the disciples collected the sect leader's sayings, and one of the sayings especially shocked the disciples, and that was sect leader Lin had once said that he was just an ordinary soul formation cultivator. Look, since the sect master was being so humble, what right did they have to be arrogant? Therefore, when the disciples slayed demons and shocked everyone, when they were praised and envied by thousands of creatures, they would always say, "This is very ordinary. I'm really a noob," and so on modestly. They were never arrogant or complacent. These humble words often shocked all living beings to the point of being speechless. For some reason, the 4-9 Immortal sect's reputation was elevated once again due to the disciples' modesty. The disciples were also very happy to carry this spirit of sect leader to greater heights on the drill ground of the 4-9 Immortal sect. Chung Ingxiong was still persevering. There are no absolutes in this world. What if the sect leader gets careless? Dongjun interrupted Chung Ingxiong with a cold chuckle as she crossed her arms over her voluptuous chest. There's no such thing as what if. If sect leader Lin loses, I can go on a date with you. Huh? Chung Ingxiong's eyes widened, and his mouth gaped open so wide that an apple could fit in it. Don't think I don't know what you're thinking. I've known for a long time that you like me. If sect leader Lin loses, I'll give you a chance, Dongjun said in a straightforward manner. You can do that? Chung Ingxiong's heart thumped in his chest, and a blush appeared on his face. Things had developed like a rabid dog that had escaped from its leash, and it had already far exceeded his expectations. Thus, among the crowd of cheering sect leader Lin on the drill ground, there was a brawny man cheering Yiling on, and Lin and Yiling stood at the center of the drill ground, and the atmosphere became more and more tense as they looked at each other. and Lin felt like a normal sparring match wouldn't be exciting enough. Thus, he suggested that Yi Ling would win as long as she could draw blood from him. If she couldn't draw blood within 15 minutes, then she would lose. Of course, he wasn't going to use his evil slaying sword, buff mystic techniques, or powers of the heavenly gods, nor was he going to use his evading turtle technique to stall for time. Yi Ling agreed without any hesitation upon hearing Lin's proposal, and a scorching battle intent flashed through her eyes. She had finally found an opportunity to defeat her master. Yi Ling's aura suddenly transformed into a frosty and menacing one. In that instant, Lin felt as if he had been targeted by a ferocious beast. Not only did chills run down his spine, but he was also struck by a sense of peril. Normal cultivators would most likely die before they even had a chance to sense danger. An opponent that could strike a sense of peril into Lin's heart was a clear indication of just how terrifyingly powerful she was. "Let's go," the woman said in a crisp, mellow voice. Before Lin had a chance to say anything, the woman's body disappeared on the spot. So fast, a black figure appeared before Lin in the blink of an eye, and her well-proportioned leg swept out in a crescent arc toward the side of Lin's neck like a scythe meant to reap lives. Not only that, but there seemed to be an extremely special power imbued within her leg, making it imbued with immense power and terrifying sharpness. Before the leg had even reached Lin, the space around it had already been distorted by the terrifying sharpness. Lin's lips twitched, unleashing a killing technique from the get-go. If a normal return to Void Stage Cultivator were to let their guard down, Yi Ling's kick would be able to decapitate them. But who was Lin? He was no ordinary return to Void Stage Cultivator. Lin's expression remained calm as he quickly grabbed onto Yi Ling's leg. Bam! The force of the collision swept up gale force winds in a radius of 5 kilometers. If it weren't for the fact that the ground had been reinforced to the extreme by the spell formation, it would have already been shattered. You're going to make such a big move right off the bat. Be careful of your lower body. Lin chuckled. Yi Ling's figure appeared before him. She was not flustered by the fact that her leg had been grabbed. Instead, a ferocious expression appeared on her face. Shadow, manifestation. Her calf suddenly disappeared, as if her body had been cut off. It was just a shadow under the sun, but became even darker. Lin faltered slightly upon seeing that his hand had missed. At this moment, Yi Ling's fist had already pierced through the air, aiming straight for his head like a cannonball. Lin slapped a palm toward Yi Ling's wrist, knocking her fist to the side. At the same time, his other hand slashed toward Yi Ling's waist like a saber. However, before his hand could even make contact with Yi Ling's slender waist, her waist had already transformed into a black shadow and disappeared, as if her body had been severed into two. What a powerful shadow manifestation technique. I didn't think you'd be able to master the shadow manifestation technique I taught you to this extent. Lin was astonished. The shadow manifestation technique was a combination of Lin's Shadow Tiger, Mist Immortal Technique, and Little Xie's Divine Sword Domain. At the time, he had only taught Yi Ling the basics, but who would have thought that Yi Ling would be able to master it to such an extent? His voice had only just fallen. He discovered that Yi Ling's fist was already upon his face again. This time, there were over 100 inky black fists. Chapter 1483. These punches weren't produced by the speed of the punches. Instead, there were over 100 punches. Shadow fists. Lin's expression shifted as he discovered that the punches before him were formed by the shadows beneath Yi Ling's feet. Each and every one of them was imbued with the power to shatter mountains and sink seas. The golden lotus insignia on Lin's forehead shimmered, and his hands were imbued with the vast power of the earth, which transformed into a series of golden afterimages that crashed toward the inky black fists. Bam, bam, bam. One black fist after another was shattered by Lin's hands. However, there was still a fish that slipped through the net. A small black fist pierced through his defense and heavily smashed into his chest. A tremendous force came crashing down with earth-shattering force. Lin was forced back half a step. Yiling was just about to give chase when boundless golden light suddenly erupted up ahead. The terrifying power of the earth crashed toward her like a divine mountain quaking fist. It was too fast, and it covered too large of an area. There was no way she could evade. She could only unleash a defensive ability as the black crystal encapsulated her entire body like an eggshell. Boom! An earth-shattering boom erupted. The golden fist crashed into the black energy crystal, and the crystal quickly cracked open before shattering. The fist's power didn't dissipate, and it crashed directly into Yiling's body. Yiling let loose a muffled groan as the sound of bones cracking erupted from her well-proportioned body, and she was blasted back for several hundred meters. Cries of surprise erupted from outside the drill ground. This was the first time they had seen their sect leader unleash a spell technique. It was an extremely simple punch, but it seemed to be imbued with the essence of the great Tao, and it sent their first senior sister flying for no reason. However, their first senior sister was also a vicious character. After she was sent flying, her body disappeared in a wraith-like manner while she was still in midair. In the next instant, Yiling appeared in front of Enlin, and lightning revolved around her fingers as she thrust them toward Enlin's face. Flash thrust. Enlin dodged to the side and evaded Yiling's lethal attack. However, it was also at this moment that Yiling's torrential barrage of attacks finally erupted. Her delicate and exquisite body instantly erupted with an extremely terrifying aura. The ethereal and mysterious shadow flower transformed into a dancing black swan. Every part of her body contained a terrifying killing move. In an instant, Enlin saw countless moves, each of them fatal. Explosive fist, sickle hook, elbow to the heart, inside lotus finger. Enlin instantly activated his Earth Lotus Supreme skill and countered every move that came his way. Their bodies collided, causing the space around them to crumble and shatter. Terrifying shockwaves swept forth like earth-shattering explosions, crashing into the barrier that Bai Ling had set up using the power of Purple Star technology and the sect's protective spell formation. Most of the disciples could no longer keep up with their speed. They could only see two afterimages flashing rapidly in the martial arts arena, erupting into violent collisions again and again. Not to mention the disciples. Even some of the pavilion masters and elders found it hard to keep up. Only Cassidy, Xiao Hong, and Su Xiaolan were able to see the battle clearly. The speed and power that Yiling was displaying were even more powerful than some return to Void Stage mighty figures who had attained the power of the Divine Tao. Enlin was becoming more and more astonished as the battle progressed. He had fought the most powerful beings in the past, so he could naturally sense the level of power that Yiling was currently displaying. Just her body techniques alone were enough to crush Ao Meng and the likes. Each and every one of her movements was imbued with extremely intricate technique, and she was able to unleash her full power to the maximum. Her slender and exquisite body was imbued with extremely terrifying power, and each and every one of her attacks was imbued with explosive power that had transcended the limits of her body techniques and was on the level of the Divine Tao. Enlin knew why Yiling's body techniques were so powerful. She had already progressed to the return to Void Stage in her 20s, and it could be said that her aptitude was the highest among all the cultivators he had ever seen. However, she had been stuck at the return to Void Initial Stage for over 80 years. Even Enlin was unable to imagine just how powerful her foundation was. Thousand Frost Lightning. Yiling extended a palm, and white lightning surged like countless spirit snakes over her palm before abruptly crashing toward Enlin's fist. Boom! Lightning exploded, wreaking havoc in a radius of close to 10 kilometers. A thick layer of frost and ice appeared on the ground around them. Enlin could also feel the lightning tearing through his body in a frenzy. At the same time, a burst of extreme frost power threatened to freeze his entire body. He didn't use his lightning manipulation technique to retaliate against Yiling, but the divine flames within his body surged violently, instantly incinerating the frost power before erupting outward. Yiling had only just unleashed her 1,000 frost lightning when Enlin's body began to glow brighter and brighter. Immediately afterward, scorching energy erupted like a volcanic eruption, instantly engulfing her body. Boom! This was an earth-shattering explosion. 6 divine flames wreaked havoc in a frenzy, incinerating all things. Scorching waves of flames engulfed everything within their field of vision. Even all of the spectating disciples let loose cries of fear. Their instinctive survival instincts forced them to retreat in fear of being caught in the shockwaves of the explosion. Thankfully, Bai Ling had set up a Dao integration stage formation in advance, thereby keeping the energy from the explosion at bay. The semi-transparent barrier quickly absorbed the energy from the explosion. The chaotic cyclone energy absorption barrier is so useful. The energy from Enlin and Yiling's battle can be used to replenish the Starfire battleship's energy source. A joyful smile appeared on Bai Ling's face. That's right, not only could this formation protect the spectators, but it could also recycle the energy. It was a free and clean energy source. Let's fight. The more intense, the better. An expectant smile appeared on Bai Ling's face. All of the spectating disciples were panting heavily. All of the newbie disciples were a little dumbstruck. They had never seen anything like this before, and they were completely dumbstruck. Divine flames engulfed heaven and earth as they crashed into the barrier in a frenzy. If it weren't for the barrier, the sect leader's attack would most likely raze this entire place to the ground. Is Sister Yiling all right? Don't worry. Sect leader Enlin is so powerful. He definitely knows what he's doing. Do you see any sense of propriety in this self-destruction? All of the disciples stared at the drill ground with fear and anxiety on their faces. Cheng Yingxiong's legs had already turned to jelly from all the yelling. This King Master was not giving his disciple a chance at all. His date with Dong Zhun was about to be ruined. A little phoenix over a meter in length revolved around Su Xiaolan while letting loose incessant cries and flapping its wings excitedly, as if it was cheering for Yiling. Perhaps it was because it was in the same boat as Yiling, and they were both fighting to resist violence and oppression, which was why it was so emotionally invested. After all, cultivating, teaching disciples, fighting Little Huang, participating in battles, and waiting for Enlin was no laughing matter. It was a person who had been wronged for several decades. The flames on the drill ground finally dissipated. Enlin was still standing at the center of the drill ground in his flowing white robe. His back was straight, and his expression was calm. The 7 divine flames revolved around him like dragons, making him appear as if he was the war god of fire. In front of him, Yiling half knelt on the ground. A few holes had been burned into her black bodysuit, revealing her fair and slightly red skin. Even her long hair had been curled up, and there was a charred aroma wafting from her body. Little Ling, you're only protecting your hair when you're fighting me? Are you looking down on your master? Enlin harumphed coldly. No. Yiling pursed her lips with an aggrieved expression. It's just that if I don't protect my hair, it's going to be burned to ashes by your divine flames. She didn't say this out loud, but she did it in her heart. Yiling didn't want her master to look down on her, and she certainly didn't want her master to see her bald head. That's right. This beautiful young woman had chosen her appearance without any hesitation when it came to power and image in the eyes of her master. And Lin didn't know what Yiling was thinking, and he charged toward Yiling. He had decided to teach his disciple a lesson. Chapter 1484. Don't treat your hair as more important than your life in battle. And Lin let loose an enraged roar as his body instantly tore through space, and it was as if a massive bird were flying through the sky behind him. Kuan Peng travel. His body tore through space and appeared before Yiling at an extremely fast speed. Yiling flipped a hand over, and an azure immortal sword flashed out from her storage ring. Her aura transformed again, and she had transformed into a sword immortal. And Lin's fist was imbued with surging divine flames as it crashed down upon Yiling, flattening the space around it, and even twisting and crumbling it. Yiling held her sword horizontally in front of her, and her feet dug into the ground as a golden sword intense soared into the heavens, as if it were a divine mountain. Determined mountain. Bam! And Lin's fist fell upon the blade of the sword, and it was as if it had struck an eternal divine mountain as the fist projection faltered. The ground that had been reinforced to the extreme began to crack open, but Yi Ling remained completely unmoved. A reminiscent expression appeared on Lin's face. He was very familiar with this sword technique. All of the spectators outside the drill ground were already letting loose cries of surprise upon seeing this. That's the 4-9 sword technique. That's right. Sister Yi Ling is using the 15th stage of the 4-9 sword technique, Determined Mountain. Who would have thought that our 4-9 sword techniques would be so powerful? Just sensing its power strikes one with a sense of despair, as if it would never be broken. Sister Yi Ling has already reached the pinnacle of mastery in the 4-9 sword techniques. All of the disciples discussed among themselves with excitement. The 4-9 sword techniques were the core sword techniques of the 4-9 immortal sect, and almost all of the core disciples could cultivate them. As such, all of them were able to identify the sword technique that Yi Ling was using. However, being able to identify the sword technique was one thing, and being able to use it was another. There were 18 stages to the 4-9 sword technique, and it was easy to learn. However, the difficulty increased exponentially with each subsequent stage. In the entire 4-9 immortal sect, there were less than 10 people who were proficient in the 15th stage, Determined Mountain. The dozen or so newbie disciples were all dumbstruck upon seeing Yi Ling block and Lin's terrifying punch. They couldn't help but pull out a small yellow booklet from their storage rings. The words 4-9 sword techniques were written on the booklet, and it was a gift upon initiation. The sword technique that Senior Brother Sun casually tossed out was actually so awesome, they felt as if they were dreaming. Just when everyone was either sighing or in shock, a cracking sound suddenly rang out. Yi Ling's body was slightly hunched over, and cracks finally began to appear on her sword intent defense, which was only growing larger and larger. Your 4-9 sword techniques are pretty good. And Lin praised with a smile. His fist force increased once again. Yi Ling's expression changed drastically. Her empty Dingjun was still unable to block Lin's fist. The azure glaze immortal sword suddenly emitted bursts of white mist, and Lin only felt that his fist was empty, as if the sword in front of him had suddenly disappeared. His fist continued to punch forward, but a premonition of danger enveloped his entire body in an instant. He could sense that he had lost track of Yi Ling. The green cloud fell from the 9 heavens, splitting the fog and white clouds. 16th blade, falling cloud cut. A clear roar sounded from high above. Too slow, and Lin raised his eyebrows slightly, but his body remained completely still as he flicked a finger through the air. Divine flames converged to form an arrow that instantly pierced through space, leaving a lethal trajectory in its wake. This was a derivative cultivation method of the first stage of his Wings of True Fire, the Crimson God arrow. His arrow was even faster than Yi Ling's falling cloud cut. A muffled groan erupted as blood splattered through the air. And Lin's body shifted to the side at the same time, and the falling cloud cut struck the ground beside him, slicing a ghastly trench into the ground. When he raised his head again, he was greeted by the sight of Yi Ling descending upon him. Her shoulder had already been scorched into a bloody hole, but there was no hint of panic on her face. Instead, there was a dangerous light flashing through her large, lively eyes. The immortal sword in Yi Ling's hand had already disappeared. Thus, she plummeted toward Lin like an injured little bird. A sense of danger suddenly welled up in Lin's heart. It was as if a ferocious beast had finally bared its fangs. A cold glint grew larger and larger in his eyes. A silvery white light lit up the entire night sky. A young woman's hair danced in the air as the light of the setting sun elongated her shadow. Her lithe and graceful body descended at an extremely fast speed as she held a glowing dagger in her right hand. In that instant, and Lin thought back to that night when Yi Ling had chopped up a bunch of Return to Void stage mighty figures in the falling dragon abyss. And this was the weapon she had used This was a sure-kill divine tool. Yi Ling was a natural-born assassin, and this divine tool was able to unleash unimaginable power in her hands. Little Ling is finally going to dance. Su Xiaolan looked on with excitement on her face. She was the person who knew Yi Ling the best. It could be said that Yi Ling had been raised by her for the past few decades. She had witnessed Yi Ling's growth with her own eyes, so she knew just how terrifying Yi Ling was with a divine tool in her hands. The silvery white light was extremely intimidating, and Lin's eyes turned snowy white as he activated his divine inspection technique for the first time. The sense of danger that Yi Ling was giving him was far too strong, and he had to unleash his full power. Under the effects of his divine inspection technique, and Lin felt as if everything in the world had slowed down. He evaded to the side, and Yi Ling's dagger only managed to slice open a corner of his shirt. Right at this moment, a bolt of golden void lightning tore through the air like a roaring dragon. Boom! Yi Ling's chest was punctured, and Lin didn't even have a chance to react before Yi Ling's body suddenly became insubstantial. An afterimage? In the next instant, Yi Ling appeared behind Lin, and the silvery white dagger swept through the air at an even more terrifying speed. However, Lin seemed to be even faster than Yi Ling, and he didn't even have to turn around to evade Yi Ling's attack. Yi Ling flicked her wrist, and the dagger changed its trajectory as she charged forward again. All of a sudden, frosty light flashed, and each flash was a lethal sneak attack. She could attack from any location in space, from Lin's left, from Lin's right, from Lin's head, and from Lin's front. Not only that, but she could also suddenly jump out from shadows. Her shadow, and Lin's shadow, and even the shadow of the pebbles and fallen leaves on the ground. Everything between heaven and earth had become her slaughterhouse, and she was the god of slaughter. Yi Ling's attacks were extremely unpredictable, and each of them was lethal. And Lin had clearly already activated his divine inspection technique, which allowed him to see through Yi Ling's attacks, but it was still very difficult for him to keep up with Yi Ling's speed. All of the disciples could only see a series of afterimages flashing through the air, as well as a frosty white blade. There was a formation that isolated the battlefield, but they could still sense the killing intent and bone-chilling intent emanating from it. That's way too terrifying. Is this the most powerful attack Senior Sister can unleash when she uses the sword of sending you safely on your way? Do you see the cracks on the barrier? Those are all caused by her sword intent. Even a Dao integration stage formation can't defend against Senior Sister's attack. How bad *SS? Shouldn't sect leader Lin be the bad *SS here? Even though he hasn't unleashed any attacks, Senior Sister is still unable to inflict even a single wound on his body. All of the disciples were discussing spiritedly among themselves. They didn't know what the two of them were fighting, but they were all very excited, and Lin's lips twitched involuntarily as he dodged and dodged. The sword that will send you on your way? Yi Ling, who was in the middle of attacking, blushed with embarrassment and humiliation, and Lin seemed to have understood something. Missing in celestial immortal, sort of sending you safely on your way. Could it be that you named it to commemorate my safe journey? Yi Ling's blush deepened, and she pursed her lips as she slashed her dagger through the air. It was as if she had silently agreed to this, and Lin couldn't help but burst into laughter. Why did such a powerful divine tool have such a lame name? Was Yi Ling inheriting his ability to name things as she pleased? Yi Ling seemed to have been exposed, and her attacks became even more ferocious, as if she wanted Lin to shut up. And Lin was ecstatic upon seeing this. Yi Ling had clearly been disrupted by his verbal evasion technique. There was a flaw. Chapter 1485. Yi Ling had chosen a good angle for this attack, but she had been too impatient and miscalculated the distance between Lin's other palm. And Lin's footsteps faltered, and he advanced instead of retreating. Yi Ling could see the smile on his face. Only now did she detect that a palm enshrouded in golden light was hurtling toward her lower abdomen. Bam! Golden light surged, and the power of the earth surged forth. Yi Ling's body was bent into the shape of a bow, and she threw up a mouthful of blood as her body flew back for several kilometers before crashing into the transparent barrier at the edge of the drill ground. Senior disciple's sister, Sister Yi Ling. All of the disciples present let loose cries of surprise upon seeing this. Cheng Yingxiong drew a sharp intake of breath. This is a sparring match, right? Dong Jun nodded with a blank expression. I think so. Even though this was a sparring match, why did it feel so horrifying? The older disciples were given a fright, and the newer core disciples were trembling uncontrollably. They looked at their legendary sect leader with awe and veneration in their eyes. He looked so harmless, but why was he beating his disciples so viciously? It's a huge taboo to be distracted by your enemy's words during a battle. I'm so disappointed that you fell into a daze with just a few words. And Lin spoke with a serious expression. His voice had only just fallen when a massive dragon constructed from great holy flames leaped out of his body before pouncing toward Yi Ling. Blood trickled down the corners of Yi Ling's lips, and she stomped down onto the barrier before landing on the ground like a bolt of lightning. She then quickly shifted to evade the divine flame dragon. However, another massive purple dragon constructed from the demonic star flame suddenly pounced toward her. Yi Ling didn't even have time to unleash her shadow manifestation technique, so she could only evade with her movement techniques. Everything can be used as a medium for your assassination, and you're the #1 killer move. This is because you're able to combine shadow manifestation and spatial skipping perfectly. And Lin spoke in an indifferent voice as a blue flaming dragon and a spatial twisting heavenly void dragon appeared behind him. However, your spell techniques are still flawed. The flaming dragons constructed from the setting moon flame and heavenly void flame roared as they pounced toward Yi Ling. The 4 fire dragons pounced and bit continuously, tearing open horrifying fissures in the ground and burning out pitch-black trails. Their combined attacks gradually forced Yi Ling into a corner again. See? You've used shadow transformation and spatial jump consecutively. You're running out of energy, aren't you? And Lin chuckled. The Blood Phoenix Divine, Fire Dragon, and Golden Dragon Divine Flames appear behind him. The power in your body can only support you for a short period of time. Also, every spatial leap and shadow transformation requires your consciousness to predict in advance. You'll have to spend all your attention just to dodge the continuous attacks of 4 fire dragons like me. How can you predict in advance? As soon as he finished speaking, another 2 fire dragons roared and pounced toward Yi Ling. 6 flaming dragons roared as they closed in on Yi Ling, sealing off all of her escape routes. Yi Ling let loose a clear cry, and a frosty killing intent instantly froze the area within a radius of over 100 meters around her. All of the 6 fire dragons began to slow down and shrink as soon as they approached her. And Lin's lips twitched upon seeing this. What powerful killing intent. Are you trying to force your way through my fire dragons? Just what had this once adorable little girl gone through to cultivate such a crooked Tao? She had embarked on a path of killing intent that was even more exaggerated than Su Qianyun's as her master, and Lin was suddenly struck by a sense of melancholy. Right at this moment, Yi Ling made her final stand like a cornered beast, and she really did manage to slice through one of the fire dragons and successfully escape from the encirclement. The power of a divine tool was nothing to scoff at. Even an assassin-type divine tool could tear apart a fire dragon over 10,000 feet in an extremely domineering manner. Just as Yi Ling was about to unleash her shadow transformation and close in on Lin, and Lin suddenly stomped a foot into the ground, and a black circle suddenly appeared beneath Yi Ling's feet, as if it were a gargantuan mouth that was going to devour everything. Boom! The terrifying gravitational force made Yi Ling's body falter. This was the core spell technique of the heaven-punishing war god, abyssal gravity. The indescribable gravitational force threatened to crush her body into mincemeat, and even the indestructible earth began to cave in. Yi Ling's body faltered slightly, and she was just about to unleash her spatial skipping technique to escape from the spell techniques area of effect. However, sometimes a split second of stagnation was enough to determine the outcome of a battle. For example, the space around her had been instantly sealed, or Lin had already used Kuan Peng travel to appear before her, or Lin's little fists were hurtling toward her chest again before she even had a chance to do anything. The golden light was as dazzling as the sun. The space within a radius of over a kilometer was twisted and shattered by his fists. Ling felt as if her body were about to be torn apart, and she threw up another mouthful of blood, which landed directly on Lin's face. The woman was sent flying before crashing heavily into the transparent energy barrier. Her whole body went limp, and her body slowly slid towards the protective wall. A trail of blood appeared along the trail. Under the light of the setting sun, half of the woman's face was obscured by her long, disheveled hair, giving her an extremely tragic appearance. Lin wiped the blood from his face, but he showed no intention of stopping as he continued to make his way toward Ling. The spectating disciples couldn't bear to watch this any longer. This was simply too tragic, and some of them were even begging Lin to let Ling off the hook. This wasn't a sparring match. He was beating her to death. Ling panted heavily as her chest rose and fell incessantly. Thank God she hadn't been struck on both sides. She looked at the man who was enshrouded in divine flames as he made his way toward her, and she silently tightened her grip on the divine weapon that she had been holding this entire time. The 4-9 sword techniques are split up into 18 stages, and progressing to the next stage is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. No one in the entire sect has been able to master the 18th stage. However, I know that there are only 17 stages, and the mantras for the 18th stage are all nonsense. And Lin's footsteps faltered slightly as he looked at the woman in the distance with a hint of surprise in his eyes. Ling raised her head, and there was no hint of dejection in her eyes. There's no such thing as the 18th stage. If there were, then the 18th stage would be a new sword technique that we've attained after we've reached the pinnacle of our swordsmanship. After all, only a sword technique that we've created is the most suitable for us, and it's the most powerful one. And Lin's heart jolted again upon hearing Ling's words. Master, did you know that I cried like an idiot when I received your inheritance from Emperor Ziwei? Tears welled up in Ling's eyes as she gripped tightly onto her dagger. The divine weapon doesn't belong to me, but I view it as a precious treasure. We're master and disciple, and we're somehow connected. I've always wanted to use my blood as a medium to find you. Ling released the dagger in her hand, and blood flowed down the corners of her lips as a relieved smile appeared on her face. It's been a long time since I've experienced the happiness you've brought me. Master, this is the 18th stage of the 4-9 sword technique, Seeking Peace. Chapter 1486. The Divine Tool, the sword to send you safely on your way, fell from Ling's hand. All of the spectating disciples and elders thought that Ling had been severely wounded, which was why the weapon had fallen from her hand. There was nothing wrong with this speculation. However, Lin's expression became unprecedentedly grave. Sure enough, in the next instant, the sword to send you safely on your way began to move on its own. A silvery white light flashed as it advanced at a speed so fast that even Lin was unable to keep up. Seeking, and wasn't he just looking for Lin? He was using his divine tool to track down Lin through the connection between him and his disciple. Almost without hesitation, he immediately used his 6 divine fires, including a holy fire. They formed layers of barriers that protected him. However, to his surprise, the divine tool suddenly disappeared right before it came into contact with the holy flames. In the next instant, all of the hairs on his body stood up on end. The divine tool dagger had appeared right in front of his face. The blade of the dagger was right before his eyes, and a chill ran down his spine. The blood that Ling had spat onto his face was emitting faint energy fluctuations, which were none other than the latent energy that could drastically enhance the power of a divine tool. So the blood she spat onto my face was also a foreshadowing? And Lin finally came to a realization in that instant. Yi Ling had told him that the divine tool didn't belong to her. Instead, it belonged to Lin. She was most likely trying to use seeking and to return the divine tool to its rightful owner, even though this was probably the most refreshing method of returning an item he had ever seen. She was returning the divine tool to send him on his way. That's right, this was the sword to send you safely on your way. And Lin was about to be sent safely on his way by this sword. Whoosh! A silvery white light flashed through the air. It then flashed through the sky like a shooting star. All of the disciples only saw a flash of white light before Lin's body fell backward. All of them widened their eyes in shock, and all of the female disciples turned pale with fright. Sect leader Lin. It's over. Was his head blasted open? There's no way he can survive after having his head pierced through by a divine tool. Wow. God finally came back to life. Is he going to die again? The disciples either sighed or cried bitterly, until Lin turned his head and glanced snappily at the spectating disciples in the distance. Please, can you guys not be so dramatic? Hearing this, all the disciples felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. Sect leader Lin's face is covered in blood, but he's still alive. As expected of sect leader Lin. Didn't Yi Ling spray the blood on his face? Hearing everyone's words, Lin used a spell technique to wash the blood off his face. However, on the side of his clean face, the crowd actually saw a blood stain that was slowly oozing blood. The wound wasn't big and seemed to have been scratched. Ing! The phoenix seemed to have realized something and cried out excitedly, flapping its pure gold wings as if it was celebrating. Sect leader Lin's face is injured. Could it be that strike just now? That move was used by senior sister Yi Ling, so she won, right? Even though they were saying this, the disciples still didn't dare to believe it. Previously, Lin had made an agreement with Yi Ling that if she could injure him and make him bleed, then he would lose the match. Now, there was a bloodstain on Lin's face. 13 minutes have elapsed, and Lin is injured. Yi Ling is the victor of this sparring match. Bai Ling announced the final result in a loud and clear voice. The entire drill ground instantly fell silent. Then, raucous cheers erupted into the heavens. Congratulations to senior sister for winning the match. She won. Senior sister actually won. Awesome. This is the most inspiring and touching counterattack I've ever seen. We are proud and elated. Everyone is happy. Ha. Everyone was elated to see Yi Ling's miserable state, and they all expressed their joy and excitement for her victory. When success was extremely difficult to obtain, people would often be filled with admiration toward the successful person and would silently stand on the same side as them. In contrast, Lin had been the most badass throughout the entire match, but he had been injured once and had become a negative example for all the disciples. Dongzheng. Cheng Yingxiong was a little excited as he looked at the sexy vixen beside him, but at the same time, he was also a little intimidated and fearful. Dongzhen patted Cheng Yingxiong's shoulder 3 times before swaying her fiery foxtail and blinking seductively with a smile. See you tomorrow. Cheng Yingxiong faltered slightly before becoming ecstatic. He turned toward Yi Ling with tears welling up in his eyes with gratitude. Thank you, senior sister Yi. On the drill ground, the raucous cheers didn't affect the two of them. Yi Ling dragged her battered body to her feet with great difficulty, and she looked up at Lin with a trembling voice. Master, I won. Lin nodded with a smile. That's right, little Ling is the best. Yi Ling stared blankly at Lin. She looked at his warm smile and his tall and straight figure. Even though he wasn't very muscular, he was extremely reliable and gave her a sense of security. She thought back to 100 years ago when she was learning sword techniques and cultivation from her master. Every time she made progress, her master would always praise her like this, praising her for being the best. Then, her master disappeared. Her master couldn't see any of her progress either. All of the praises that she had become accustomed to suddenly disappeared from her life. Only then did she realize how much she wanted to be acknowledged by that person for all of her hard work. Without that person's praises, she didn't know who to tell about the joy she felt every time she made progress. From being at a loss for what to do, to focusing wholeheartedly on Tao, spirit nurturing, soul formation, return of void. Along the way, she wanted so badly to tell that person about all of her progress. She wanted so badly to hear that person praise, "Little Ling is the best." Again, this was a dream that she had never dared to tell anyone, but it had finally come true today. Yiling stared at the white-robed figure in front of her eyes, and hot tears began to flow from her eyes. "Hey, little Ling, why are you crying? Did I praise you in the wrong way?" And Lin was given a fright by the sight of Yiling's tears. Yiling burst into laughter. Her smile was particularly enchanting under the setting sun. After smiling for a while, she felt her vision blur a little. Her body swayed slightly, and she fell backward. In the next instant, a light breeze blew past, and Lin half knelt to the ground and wrapped his arms around Yiling's slender waist before cradling her in his arms. Little Ling, are you all right?" And Lin looked at Yiling with a hint of guilt in his eyes, and he was remorseful that he had gone too far. "I'm fine. I'm just too tired, but I'm very happy, and I want to rest as soon as I relax." Yiling felt the warmth radiating from her body, and she snuggled into Lin's arms with a hint of attachment. Her actions and demeanor were completely unlike those of a young woman. Instead, she was more like a little girl who was clinging on her big brother. She raised her head and looked up at the gradually darkening sky. There were still remnants of reddish-golden and purple light lingering in the sky, making it appear like a vibrant oil painting. She couldn't help but ask, "Master, do you like to watch the sunset?" And Lin faltered momentarily before nodding. "I do. I like it too." A sweet smile appeared on Yiling's face as she heaved a long sigh before slowly closing her eyes. A familiar aura and a familiar warmth. In her dreams, Yiling felt as if she had returned to 100 years ago. Every time she finished practicing her sword techniques, the sun would set, and she would be drenched in sweat. And Lin would often call out to her from the drill ground, "Let's go. Little Ling Master has finished cooking, so come home and eat." Yiling would always pounce toward her master with elation and hold onto his warm hand as she told him about her gains from the day. Hearing in Lin's praise made her feel as if the day had been a complete and fulfilling one. Time flew by, and the past was no longer the same. Thankfully, her master had finally returned home. With her master by her side, she enjoyed the sunset. She really liked it. Chapter 1487. And Lin held the sleeping Yiling in his arms, and he discovered that her tense body was now completely relaxed, most likely because she had someone she could trust by her side. A green figure instantly appeared in front of Lin and looked nervously at Yiling in his arms. "She's fine. She must have fallen asleep due to overexertion." Su Xiaolan heaved a sigh of relief after checking Yiling's condition. She glared at Lin with a cold expression. "You're the master, yet you dare to lay your hands on your disciple? If I were her, I wouldn't bear to do that to her." Su Xiaolan was Yiling's second master, as she couldn't help but feel heartache at the sight of Yiling's wounded body. And Lin was quite open-minded about this. "She has cultivated for so long, and she wants my approval, so I can't go easy on her. Otherwise, she won't be happy even if she wins. Only by going all out would she be satisfied. Look at how happy she was just now." Su Xiaolan heaved a forlorn sigh. It was quite clear that Lin was right. What a silly child. Su Xiaolan stroked Yiling's cheek, which was still stained with blood, as she spoke in a gentle voice. How could she not understand Yiling's thoughts? And Lin waved a hand and stowed the sword to send you safely on your way into Yiling's storage ring. He then carried Yiling back to the pavilion with Su Xiaolan in his arms. This earth-shattering battle between master and disciple finally drew to a conclusion. All of the disciples present had a feast for their eyes. Not only had they experienced how powerful their sect leader was, but they had also realized just how bad *SS the cultivation methods they were cultivating in were. The 4 9-sword techniques are so powerful. I have to work even harder to cultivate them from now on. If the 4-9 sword techniques are already so powerful, then wouldn't the 4-9 cultivation method be amazing as well? Of course, senior sister Yi Ling, who defeated the sect leader, cultivates the 4-9 cultivation method. After watching this battle, not only did the disciples' eyes receive a baptism, their Tao hearts also received a comprehensive baptism. They became more confident and were filled with more hope for the future. And Lin stood on the railing of the attic, gazing at the two bright moons in the sky. Su Xiaolan and Su Qianyan were currently cleaning Yi Ling's wounds and changing her clothes. And Lin wouldn't be able to do such a thing. He would be beaten to death by Su Xiaolan. Therefore, he could only wait outside the house. Beside him were Xianyuan, Cheng, Dabai, and Tina, all of whom were watching the moon with him. What's going on with Big Sister Cheng? It's been 100 years, but she still hasn't defeated that mysterious, powerful being? And Lin looked up at the blood moon and the crescent moon in the night sky with a perplexed expression. He still remembered that Cheng. He had the upper hand when he looked at the sky, but now the battle between the two moons had become a stalemate. In other words, the gap between Cheng Yi and that mysterious expert had been evened out. Xianyuan Cheng heaved a faint sigh. Even after countless preparations, she still can't defeat fate. And Lin's eyes narrowed slightly. What do you mean? In the 10 years since you disappeared, the blood moon has become dull and lusterless, while the silver moon is as white as a pearl. If the battle continues, the blood moon will lose without a doubt. Xianyuan Cheng said. However, we've all overlooked something, and that's that Cheng Yi is a human. And Lin already had a bad premonition upon hearing this. The Tao of the true moon is the one and only Tao in this world, and it connects directly to the essence of the great Tao of heaven and earth. The sky can't have two moons at the same time, and this is the law of the heavens. Now that the heavenly Tao is going to destroy the human race, will it still allow the human race to rule over the only moon? It's very clear that it will only reject. Xianyuan Cheng was a little enraged as he spoke to this point. Hence, the obstacle that Cheng Yi is facing is extremely terrifying. It's the subconscious consciousness of the heavenly Tao. If Cheng Yi wants the moon, the heavens will instinctively refuse to give it to her. Then, upon seeing that the Dark Wing tribe also wants the moon, the heavens will instinctively give the Dark Wing tribe preferential treatment. Hence, this is something that she can't do unless she can defeat the heavens. And Lin fell silent. He understood Cheng Yi's situation, and he also understood why the Dark Wing tribe mighty figure was able to turn the tables. Cheng Yi felt like she was facing an unfair battle that she had no chance of winning. The only thing she could do was to persevere until a new variable appeared in the world. Wait, a Dark Wing tribe mighty figure? And Lin faltered slightly as he realized something. That's right, we've already ascertained her identity. She's the moonlit night monarch of the Dark Wing tribe, and she's trying to progress to the Tao integration stage. However, we don't know where she's right now, so there's nothing we can do, Xianyuan Cheng replied. And Lin came to a sudden realization. So it was the moonlit night monarch. Thinking back, she had tried to steal the evil-slaying sword from him, and had even engaged in a fierce battle with him. Who would have thought that she was about to reach the Tao integration stage now? And Lin made up his mind. He was going to visit Cheng Yi someday and see if there was anything he could do to help her. Chirp! The cry of a phoenix sounded in the distance. A streak of reddish-golden light flashed through the night sky before landing lightly on the railing beside Lin. It looked up at Lin with its large, round eyes, and there was a golden tree branch in its beak. The phoenix was currently in its miniature form. It was only 1 meter in length, and its body was like that of a peacock, but it was countless times more regal and majestic than a peacock. Even in its miniature form, one couldn't help but feel a sense of reverence toward it. Little Huang, what's that in your beak? And Lin stroked the phoenix's head to find that it was very furry and warm. Even though Little Huang had already established a beast pet contract with Su Xiaolan, and Lin still included it in his beast pet team. After all, he had already given it a name, so it would always be in Lin's bird no matter where it went. The phoenix cocked its head to the side and shot an arrogant glance at Enlin. It let out a defiant chirp, perhaps because it was displeased that Enlin was touching it, or because it was displeased that Enlin was calling it Little Huang. Right at this moment, Su Xiaolan pushed open the door, and her expression instantly darkened upon seeing this. Little Huang, Enlin is your true master. Who are you trying to impress? The phoenix shuddered, and even its tail stood up on end. It immediately leaped into Enlin's arms and began to rub its body against Enlin's as it wriggled its body and rubbed itself against Enlin's chest seductively. Enlin, for some reason, he was suddenly feeling a little sympathetic toward this phoenix. Just what had it experienced to make it so obedient to Su Xiaolan? One had to realize that this was the most regal and beautiful mythological beast in this world. In his mind, the only creature that could compare with this phoenix was the nine-color divine vermilion bird in the faraway southern heavenly wing nation. However, even that was a different level of magnificence. Enlin felt like it was time to ask Su Xiaolan for guidance. If he could master this technique, then Little Gu, Little Hong, and Little Na would also be as obedient as this phoenix. His life would be perfect. Chapter 1488. Su Xiaolan's expression eased a little when she saw the phoenix trying to curry favor with Enlin. She took the golden branch from the phoenix's mouth and explained to Enlin, "This is a phoenix wudong tree." Enlin's eyes lit up. Phoenix wudong tree? Is that the branch of the legendary wudong tree that even phoenixes love to perch on? Su Xiaolan shook her head. That's not what I mean. The phoenix doesn't perch on the wudong tree just because it's good. It's because the phoenix often perches on the wudong tree that the wudong tree becomes good. Everyone's curiosity was piqued upon hearing this. Su Xiaolan explained, Little Huang often sleeps on the wudong tree, and its excrement adheres to the wudong tree's branches. After years of absorption and precipitation, the wudong tree's branches will become extremely pure fire elemental and wood elemental spirit medicines. Everyone exclaimed in amazement. That sounds awesome. Enlin's lips twitched slightly. He looked at the regal phoenix and couldn't help but ask, Xiaolan, are you saying that Little Huang held a tree branch nourished with its own excrement in its mouth and happily came to pay tribute? Everyone, Su Xiaolan, the phoenix's feathers stood on end. Little Huang was about to fight Enlin to the death, but Su Xiaolan held it back. Don't be so impulsive. Enlin's words aren't wrong. That's the truth. Besides, your name is Little Huang, and many dogs are also named Little Huang. Dogs can eat excrement, so why can't you hold a tree branch nourished with excrement in your mouth? Su Xiaolan consoled the phoenix again. The phoenix, Enlin, everyone looked at the phoenix with shock and sympathy. To everyone's surprise, the phoenix accepted Su Xiaolan's consolation before lying on the ground with a lifeless expression. Everyone felt even more sympathy for the phoenix upon seeing this. Next time, I have to get Xiaolan to teach me how to tame my pet beasts, Enlin thought to himself. Su Xiaolan fiddled with the golden branches, nodded slightly, and was about to enter the house. Wait, Xiaolan, you have to tell me how to use this branch. You're not telling Yu Ling to eat it, are you? Enlin couldn't help but ask. He added in his heart, if you force my disciple to eat shit, I won't agree even if you beat me to death. Su Xiaolan seemed to know what Enlin was thinking. She couldn't help but laugh and said, What are you thinking? The phoenix wudong tree has extremely pure flame and wood powers, and it's especially useful for healing injuries. I'm extracting its life force, so how can I let my precious disciple chew on the branch? Hearing this, Enlin was finally relieved and followed Su Xiaolan. He continued to observe the stars. Then, Phoenix directly pushed him out of the attic from behind. Little Huang was a vengeful person, and now that Xiaolan was gone, it could finally take revenge on Enlin. Nighttime in the 4-9 Immortal sect was very peaceful. Perhaps some people were sleeping, some were meditating, but no one dared to fight. If anyone dared to make a ruckus, then they would be locked up the next day. However, at this moment, Enlin was awakened by the phoenix's rumbling, and many of the disciples who were either sleeping or meditating were awakened. What's that sound? Holy F***CK. How dare he fight in the 4-9 immortal sect at night? Haha, he's gonna be locked up. I'm gonna eat shit if he doesn't get locked up for at least half a month after causing such a huge commotion. Let's go watch the show. Huh, they're not fighting anymore? Just as all of the sect disciples were about to head over to watch the show, the flames suddenly disappeared. And Lin lay on the ground, panting heavily, and a section of his backside was exposed, indicating that he had been burned. The phoenix lay on the ground like a dead chicken with its feathers all over the ground, and there were a few large bumps on its head. Little Huang, I'm going to report you to Xiaolan if you keep jumping around like this. And Lin lay on the ground with an enraged expression. The phoenix shuddered as a pitiable expression appeared on its face toward Lin. Chirp, 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 and Lin couldn't help but chuckle. Say, why are you so scared of Xiaolan? You're the ruler of the bird tribe, the high and mighty phoenix. The phoenix wore a disconsolate expression. Chirp, chirp, chirp. By the way, how did she teach you? How did you become so obedient? And Lin asked curiously. It was not enough to just listen to one side of the story. He had to investigate the truth from multiple angles. The phoenix wore a bitter expression. Chirp, chirp, chirp. Chirp, 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 chirp. And Lin's expression darkened upon hearing this. Oi, what are you trying to say? Chirp once is enough. Why do you have to chirp so many times? The phoenix heaved a forlorn sigh. Chirp, 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 chirp. That's right, I get what you're trying to say, but all my beast pets are so adorable, and I really can't bear to beat them up. And Lin shook his head. The phoenix. At this moment, a fairy who was tugging on Lin's hair chuckled. Giant and Lin, you won't be able to hit me even if you want to. I can escape into the divine mirror world right away. And Lin knew that she was right. Tina was almost never in danger now, and she could hide in the divine mirror world. Even a Dao integration stage, super mighty figure wouldn't be able to do anything to her. He had heard that this little girl had killed 3 Heaven Pioneer stage great generals on the Western Front. So, she really was quite powerful. By the way, Giant and Lin, you're back. You're still hiding your identity. What are you up to? Tina asked. The human army had been pushed back again and again. The Eastern, Northern, and Central fronts had all entered the Kingdom of the 9 States. So even if Lin were to return, he wouldn't be able to do much. About that, and Lin's eyes narrowed slightly before a smile suddenly appeared on his face. I'm going to destroy at least one of the heavenly human tribe's armies. Little Na's mouth gaped open upon hearing this, and even the phoenix's body shuddered upon hearing this. What a domineering statement. Peace and quiet returned to the night. Perhaps it was because the battle today had been far too intense, but Lin also closed his eyes to rest for a while. The next morning, Chunshin sent a voice transmission talisman to inform him that the ancient Dragon Empress was about to arrive. The ancient Dragon Empress wore a colorful imperial robe and tore through space to arrive at the gate of the 4-9 immortal sect. She was given a fright by the sight before her. Over 1,000 disciples and elders were beating drums and gongs to welcome her with a warm welcome. The tortoise duo of the past were now holding hands and constantly unleashing fire-type magic techniques. They blasted flames into the sky, creating beautiful fireworks. We warmly welcome the ancient Dragon Empress to our sect. The ancient Dragon Empress has worked tirelessly to teach us. You are the most holy teacher. I'm willing to nurture exceptional talents for the sake of my students, and I'm diligent. Even though the heavens and the earth are eternal, Master's kindness will never end. Teacher Ancient Dragon Empress, I love you. Over 1,000 disciples, elders, and pavilion lords yelled at the same time with earnest and fervent expressions. The Ancient Dragon Empress' eyes widened in shock. Chapter 1489. Never would the Ancient Dragon Empress have thought that the entire sect would come out to welcome her. Furthermore, they were welcoming her in such a bizarre manner. What the hell were those idioms and reciting poems? An Ancient Dragon Empress, I love you? How shameless could they be? She didn't even know what to say at the sight of everyone's earnest expressions. After a short pause, a smile appeared on the Ancient Dragon Empress' face. Thank you for your warm welcome. You're welcome. I hope we can all get along in the future. She was the empress of the entire evil dragon tribe, after all, so she had no problem dealing with a situation like this. The spatial rift behind the ancient dragon empress hadn't even healed, yet when a holy light suddenly descended. The holy light seemed to have warmed heaven and earth. Not only that, but all living beings that were illuminated by the holy light had their impurities cleansed. And Lin's expression shifted slightly. What a powerful, purifying power. An angel with 6 wings spread out from the rift. She wore a flowing white dress, and her dazzling golden hair danced in the wind. Her skin was as translucent as jade, and her features were exquisitely beautiful. She wore a warm, healing smile on her face. Hi, everyone. I am Rafaela, the guard of the ancient dragon empress. Please take care of me. The angel's voice was very pleasant to the ears, and her tone was very comforting. Everyone was stunned by the angel's beauty, and they were even more astonished upon hearing her name. In particular, some of the disciples who had only just joined the sect were already shrieking in excitement. Rafaela, she's one of the 4 archangels of the Garden of Eden. Rafaela, she's so beautiful. I didn't think such a pure and beautiful smile could exist in this world. And she looks so gentle and gentle. Crap, my heart is racing. All of the disciples were already getting excited. Compared to the ancient dragon empress, Rafaela was more attention-grabbing. The ancient dragon empress felt an indescribable sense of suffocation in her heart. Rafaela smiled warmly in response to all of the praise and awe, and she even nodded at all of the disciples in an elegant and graceful manner. This elevated her image to a whole new level in everyone's hearts. And Lin was quite impressed by this, but he wasn't surprised. He knew that the Lightwing clan was a group of natural idols, and Rafaela was a perfect example of this. If she wanted to become a star, she could probably become the #1 female star on the Taichu continent with her beautiful looks and super social skills. Raphael's voice was clear and sweet, so she should have no problem singing. Her appearance was impeccable. If she showed her face more, it would probably be unforgettable. Her smile was so pure and natural that people couldn't take their eyes off her. Unknowingly, and Lin began to list out Raphael's many good points. It was only when Su Xiaolan smacked him on the head that he came to a sudden realization. What a strong affinity. Is this Raphael's ability? And Lin was shocked. Su Xiaolan's mouth twitched. Is this the reason why you can't take your eyes off her? Lin. Raphael seemed to have noticed what was happening to Lin, and she couldn't help but chuckle to herself. Her beautiful light blue eyes were slightly curved, as if she was taking pleasure in Lin's misfortune. This was a very detestable behavior, but no one was disgusted by it. Instead, they felt like it was very natural and adorable. What a vixen. Tina put her hands on her hips and harumphed with rage. Raphael looked at the little fairy on Lin's shoulder, and she stepped forward with a pristine, fair foot. She appeared before the little fairy in the blink of an eye and leaned forward with a warm smile on her face. You're right. I'm a vixen among angels, and you're an angel among vixens. Tina's body shuddered slightly, and she was suddenly struck by a sense of excitement. Su Xiaolan was the only one who hadn't lost her composure, and a smile appeared on her face. All right, let's not stand here. Let's get teacher Ancient Dragon Empress to familiarize herself with the 4-9 Immortal sect first. Sure, it's the sect leader's responsibility to show them around. And Lin immediately volunteered with excitement. Splat! Boom! And Lin was slapped into the ground by Su Xiaolan, and his body sank several hundred meters into the ground. Su Xiaolan's smile remained on her face. The sect leader's health is a little unwell, so I'll show you around in his stead. Gasp! When the crowd saw this scene, they could not help but gasp. The sect leader's health is a little unwell? Is it because you've hit him so hard that he's hurt? Many of the disciples seemed to have come to a sudden realization. So Xiaolan was still at the top of the sect's food chain. Even the ancient dragon empress and Raphael faltered slightly upon seeing this before feeling an indescribable sense of panic. Thank you, Ms. Su Xiaolan, the ancient dragon empress said with a smile. Thank you very much. Raphael withdrew her 6 wings and extended a slight bow. In the face of the top dogs of the 4-9 immortal sect, they didn't dare to act rashly. Thus, Su Xiaolan, the ancient dragon empress, and Raphael made their way through the gate of the immortal sect before everyone's eyes. Some of the disciples finally came to their senses and heaved forlorn sighs. "Why didn't you prepare the welcome lines for Raphael just then? How regretful. I really want her to hear my words, even if it's just yelling lines. I didn't think I would be able to see Archangel Raphael up close. How could there be such a beautiful angel in this world?" Even though Raphael had already walked away, everyone was still discussing this topic. She didn't need to flaunt her charm, but she would naturally become the center of attention as soon as she appeared. As for the ancient dragon empress, who was the ancient dragon empress? Was she Raphael's entourage? At this moment, within a crater several hundred meters deep at the entrance of the sect, Enlin was staring blankly up at the sky above the crater. "Giant Enlin, why didn't you follow her? If you had followed Xiaolan just then, she wouldn't have been able to chase you away. That way, you would have been able to interact with that beautiful big sister angel." Tina tugged on Enlin's hair. Enlin didn't reply. Instead, he murmured to himself, "To think that the 4th heavenly disciple's attendant of the heaven-crushing sect is already a Tao integration stage super mighty figure. This heaven-crushing sect is way too powerful. Isn't it a good thing that they're powerful? That way, the human race will have a better chance at victory." Tina was a little perplexed. She could hear the concern in Enlin's voice. "You have to realize that aside from Chun Chun, the 1st and 4th heavenly disciples of the heaven-crushing sect aren't humans. Do you really believe that they'll wholeheartedly fight for the survival of the human race with their lives on the line?" Enlin voiced his thoughts. Tina blinked her emerald eyes. "Seeing as that's the case, why don't you, Giant Enlin, join the heaven-crushing sect? You could become their leader and make them listen to you." Chapter 1490. Boom! Tina's words jolted him out of his reverie. Enlin was suddenly enlightened. If he was worried that the heaven-crushing sect wouldn't serve the human race wholeheartedly, then he could just infiltrate their ranks and become the leader of the heaven-crushing sect. When that time came, the heaven-crushing sect would belong to him, and he wouldn't have to worry about them stirring up trouble. That's true, but won't it be a little difficult? Enlin hesitated momentarily. He and Chun Chun had stayed in that strange space for 100 days, so they had interacted quite a bit. He knew that Cyril was the most powerful being in the true demon tribe. Setting aside all of his special abilities, he was at least a god of creation. Enlin was only a measly return to void stage mighty figure. So how was he going to take over the throne? So be it. I'll take it one step at a time. Enlin slapped his own face to wake himself up before crawling out of the hole. Su Xiaolan took the ancient dragon empress and Raphaela on a brief tour of the sect. As for the mystic realms and mystic realms, those were classified information of the sect, so she didn't take them with her. After half a day, the 3 of them completed their tour. Enlin began to look for students to learn the heaven-crushing techniques. Apparently, the heaven-crushing techniques could only be learned after attaining spatial power, which meant that the minimum requirement was the return to void stage. Thus, he gathered all of the return to void stage mighty figures who were still active in the sect. Dabai, Xiaohong, Merlin, Cassidy, Xianyuan Cheng, Su Qianyan, Yiling, Tina, Lu Qianhuan, Sun Yulaw, Yao Mingxi Bai Ling. Even Su Xiaolan and Little Huang came to learn. The heaven-crushing techniques were very special. They required one to observe the great Tao of heaven and earth and understand what the heavens were before cultivating the true intent of breaking through all shackles. The specific learning process was very complex, and how far one could progress depended on one's aptitude. For example, the ancient dragon empress was able to gather the will of an entire tribe before learning the heaven-crushing techniques and taking advantage of the flaws in the heavenly Tao of the ancient dragon realm and the Tai Chu continent to forcibly break through the barrier between the 2 worlds and enter the Tai Chu continent, thereby destroying the ancient dragon realm along with her. This kind of aptitude was top-notch in the heaven-crushing sect, And Lin also had a mysterious talent in the Heaven Splitter art. With Chun Chin's assistance, he had actually already mastered the most powerful heaven-crushing techniques. But he didn't know how to teach people, and he didn't know how to lead people into the sect. Otherwise, he could be a teacher himself. The ancient Dragon Empress stood on the drill ground and sighed with emotion at the sight of all of the vibrant prodigies and mighty figures before her. The 4-9 Immortal sect was becoming more and more terrifying. Most of the 4-9 Immortal sect forces were on the front lines. The group in front of him was a small portion of experts who had just returned to recuperate. Even so, it was already comparable to a first-rate force on the continent. Teacher Gulong, when are we starting? Sun Yulua asked excitedly. The ancient dragon empress expression darkened slightly. My name is not Ancient Dragon. I'm the ancient dragon empress. Su Qinyun fell into deep thought and said softly, Emperor is the title of the position. Ancient Dragon should be the specific title, so it shouldn't be a problem. Ancient Dragon Empress. It sounded very reasonable. Speaking of which, why did she call herself the Ancient Dragon Empress in the first place? All right, you can call me Jean Ling. The Ancient Dragon Empress heaved a forlorn sigh. Oh! Everyone let loose cries of surprise as they stared at the Ancient Dragon Empress with scorching eyes, as if to say that they finally knew the Ancient Dragon Empress' real name. All right, teacher, Ancient Dragon Empress. Lu Qianhuan immediately replied. You can call me Jean Ling. The Ancient Dragon Empress smiled. Yes, teacher, Ancient Dragon Empress. Lu Qianhuan replied with a serious expression. The Ancient Dragon Empress was dumbstruck. Why was this girl so stubborn? Sister Lu, call her Jean Ling. Su Qinyun tugged on Lu Qianhuan's sleeve before speaking in a soft voice. Su Qinyun, you have to use your brain and think about it. Why is Jean Ling called the Ancient Dragon Empress now? It's because she thinks the name Jean Ling is too vulgar, so she wants everyone to call her the Ancient Dragon Empress. This is like a so-and-so telling others not to call her so-and-so and to refer to her as Her Majesty. She likes to be referred to as the Ancient Dragon Empress, so we naturally have to cater to her preferences. We have to suck up to her and make her happy, so she'll be willing to teach us more spell techniques. Lu Qianhuan patted Su Qinyun's head with a meaningful and heartfelt expression as she spoke to Su Qinyun. Xinyuan Cheng also came to a realization. Su Qinyun, don't call her teacher Ancient Dragon Empress anymore. You have to add the word Empress to her title to give her some face. Su Qinyun was enlightened upon hearing this, and a faint smile appeared on her face as she turned toward the Ancient Dragon Empress. Teacher, Ancient Dragon Empress, when do we begin? The Ancient Dragon Empress clasped a hand over her chest. You King went around in circles, and you're back to square one? You finally revealed your real name, only to be scorned by her and continue to call me the Ancient Dragon Empress. What do you mean, give me some face? I'm not the kind of dragon you think I am. The Ancient Dragon Empress felt extremely depressed, but she didn't know what to say in response, so she could only muster up her courage and begin the lesson. I'm going to teach everyone a cultivation method that will allow you to better communicate with heaven and earth and better understand the essence of the heavenly Tao. The lesson began. Thankfully, everyone was very diligent, and there were no hiccups along the way. It was just that Dabai was a little perverted and kept looking around. Xiao Hong was a little lazy and didn't want to move. Merlin and Cassidy were a little obsessed and kept licking their lips at Enlin. Lu Qianhuan was a little eccentric and kept thinking about cosplay. Sun Yulua was a little scary and kept pretending to be a ghost. The Phoenix was a little mischievous and kept flying around, chirping and crying. Xin Yuancheng was a little annoying. He was almost referring to the heaven-crushing sect as the heaven-exploding sect. Bai Ling was a little professional. She was learning how to replace spell techniques with a massive machine and even asked some questions that the Ancient Dragon Empress couldn't understand. Aside from all of this, being a teacher wasn't that difficult. The Ancient Dragon Empress looked up into the sky with tears welling up in her eyes. Don't be too dejected, Master. These students are quite interesting, so they won't be difficult to teach. Raphaela's gentle and soothing voice sounded beside her ear. The Ancient Dragon Empress rubbed her head. Rafaela, how about I cast another heart-saving spell technique on you? Let's do it again. The ancient dragon empress nodded with an aggrieved expression. Never would she have thought that her heavenly disciple servant would become her heart-saving medical staff. What a heart-wrenching experience this was. After the heart-saving spell technique, teacher Ancient Dragon Empress was full of vigor again as she immersed herself in teaching. The students were all full of themselves, so the teacher had to use everything she had. Before they knew it, 10 days had passed. The Ancient Dragon Empress discovered that she had lost quite a few strands of hair. After a series of high-intensity lessons, the students didn't waste the few strands of hair that the Ancient Dragon Empress had sacrificed. On the drill ground, the sun hung high in the sky. The Ancient Dragon Empress faced the dozen or so students, and a smile appeared on her beautiful and heroic features. Today is the day for me to assess the results of your cultivation. I hope all of you can perform well. Chapter 1491. The heaven-crushing techniques actually placed a lot of emphasis on understanding and aptitude. The aptitude referred to here was not aptitude in cultivation. Instead, it was aptitude in observing the Tao of the heavens. The two were not the same. Those who understood would be able to grasp the basics very easily, and the more they studied, the more profound they would become. Those who didn't understand would be able to achieve very little no matter how hard they tried. Take Shui Zhantian, for example. Even though he hadn't joined the heaven-crushing sect, the Ancient Dragon Empress was very optimistic about him and had taught him the heaven-crushing techniques under the condition that the mystic techniques were kept a secret. Now, he was the most proficient heaven-crushing techniques cultivator below the Tao integration stage. This was the aptitude of the heaven-crushing techniques. Aptitude was far more important than perseverance in studying. She could only teach them how to fuse heaven-crushing true intent into their own power. Even though they could improve through practice, aptitude determined everything. 10 days of study was enough to determine which of these people would be able to progress further and further in the heaven-crushing sect and become the pillars of the sect. Next, use your heaven-crushing techniques to attack me with all your might, and I'll use my heaven-crushing techniques to defend myself. The Ancient Dragon Empress stood on the drill ground with a confident expression on her face. After attaining heaven-crushing true intent, one would be able to fuse their own power to create heaven-crushing techniques. This was the allure of the heaven-crushing sect. It was easy to get started, but if one wanted to progress further, they had to rely on aptitude. Who's going first? The Ancient Dragon Empress asked with a smile. Everyone looked at one another. A black-robed man with a cold expression stepped forward. I'll go first. The first to step forward was Yao Mingxi from the Spirit Sword State. He was once in Lin's diehard fan, but now he was a return to Void Stage Sword Immortal. Please. The Ancient Dragon Empress waved a sleeve through the air before extending a slender hand toward the man. Teacher Ancient Dragon Empress, I'm going first. Yao Mingxi drew his long sword, and it flew through the air like a dragon. The sword projection transformed into an azure dragon that roared toward the Ancient Dragon Empress with earth-shattering might. It was imbued with a sense of pride and arrogance, as if its life was in its own hands. The Ancient Dragon Empress' colorful dragon robe fluttered violently in the face of the sword intent. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, her pure golden eyes seemed to have pierced through the darkness, as well as the power to split heaven and earth apart. Break for me. She spat out the true dragon's decree. The sound waves transformed into substance and instantly spread out. Yao Mingxi's green dragon was instantly shattered by the sound waves. At the same time, his chest felt like it had been hit by a heavy hammer, and his body flew backward like a cannonball. Puff. He spat out a mouthful of blood and tumbled to the ground in an extremely sorry state. The Ancient Dragon Empress shook her head. His aptitude is mediocre. Even my destiny is my own is so powerless. When she said that his aptitude was mediocre, she meant that he was no different from the average return to Void Stage Cultivator. Yao Mingxi crawled up from the ground and was a little disappointed to hear this. but he quickly composed himself and extended a respectful salute. "Thank you for your guidance, teacher, ancient dragon empress." The ancient dragon empress nodded with a smile. For some reason, she was feeling quite elated. These kids had been messing around with her for the past few days. She was going to get back at them today. Rafaela offered a comforting smile. "You don't have to feel too much pressure. After all, only 1 out of 10 return to void stage mighty figures who cultivate the heaven-crushing techniques are quite outstanding. Even if you're only mediocre, you'll still be able to deal with the heavenly human tribe more easily after cultivating the heaven-crushing techniques. It's a win-win situation." The Archangel's warm smile, coupled with her gentle and considerate words, instantly alleviated Yao Mingxi's sense of disappointment. Even the people behind him were feeling a lot less tense. And Lin was even more impressed by this six-winged angel upon seeing this. Wouldn't it be great if she could handle the diplomatic affairs of the 4-9 Immortal sect? "Who's next?" the ancient dragon empress asked with a smile. Let me. Lu Qianhuan waved her wand with an eager expression. She wore a sailor outfit that revealed her long, sexy legs. "Bring it on." The ancient dragon empress prepared herself. The pink wand in Lu Qianhuan's hand rotated at high speed as a terrifying power converged. This power was imbued with the power of termination, and if unleashed to the extreme, it would be able to bring the entire heaven and earth to an end. The ancient dragon empress' eyes lit up. "Oh, that's pretty good heaven-crushing true intent. It's very unique. Eat this heaven-crushing final spark." The young sorceress roared as a pillar of light, imbued with the power of termination, erupted from her wand. Boom! A white energy wave tore through the earth before crashing directly toward the ancient dragon empress' face. Shatter! The ancient dragon empress stood on the spot as she unleashed her mantra again. Her sound waves transformed into substantial sound waves that crashed toward the energy wave. The ancient dragon empress power was just about to shatter the light wave. However, Lu Qianhuan seemed to have thrown all caution to the wind, and she tossed her wand into the air before stomping her foot again. Sorceress mode activate. Heaven-crushing final spark. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Over 100 golden holes suddenly appeared in the air, all of which were quickly accumulating energy. The energy within each hole was comparable to the power of her heaven-crushing final spark. Boom, boom, boom. Over 100 heaven-crushing final sparks crashed toward the ancient dragon empress at once. The ancient dragon empress expression finally became grave upon seeing this. Heaven-crushing armor. The ancient dragon empress took a deep breath as an indestructible armor materialized around her body. If she was going to crush the heavens, then she had to protect herself first. A semi-transparent golden dress draped over the ancient dragon empress body. This was her armor to crush the heavens. Relentless explosions rocked the earth. The ancient dragon empress was blasted over 100 times, and Lu Qianhuan didn't even have a chance to see how the ancient dragon empress was faring before she heard a familiar voice. Heaven-crushing wrath palm. A palm strike suddenly tore through the energy explosions before crashing into Lu Qianhuan's body and sending her flying before tumbling to the ground with injuries. Lu Qianhuan had been defeated. A hint of surprise appeared on the ancient dragon empress' face. Your aptitude is exceptional. You were able to fuse the Tao of termination into your heaven-crushing technique and end the heavens with your own Tao. If you cultivate diligently, you'll definitely be able to make new breakthroughs. Thank you, teacher. Lu Qianhuan extended a curtsy with a wide grin in the face of the praise, as if she had only done something insignificant. The ancient dragon empress' lips twitched. She was the fourth heavenly disciple. Couldn't she at least pretend to be ecstatic when she gave her such a high evaluation? No one took the ancient dragon empress evaluation to heart. Only Rafaela was extremely surprised. Even if they didn't unleash their cultivation bases or divine Tao, it would still be quite an impressive feat to be able to force the ancient dragon empress to unleash a heaven-crushing technique. As expected, the 4-9 Immortal sect really was filled with prodigies. Dabai, you go. And Lin instructed, Teacher Ancient Dragon Empress, I'm coming. Woof. Dabai pounced toward the Ancient Dragon Empress, excitedly with his tongue hanging out of his mouth. His eyes were still fixated on her voluptuous breasts and her tall, slender figure. A disdainful expression appeared on the Ancient Dragon Empress' face. F***CK off. Dabai was knocked flying by the terrifying sound waves. He also received an average aptitude rating. Raffaella heaved a sigh of relief. It looked like there were only a few freakishly talented prodigies. Right at this moment, sect leader Lin was a little displeased. The Ancient Dragon Empress had been teaching them for 10 days, but they kept losing. Not only was this a disgrace to the sect, but it was also a disgrace to their teacher. The Ancient Dragon Empress seemed to have seen everyone's concerned expressions, and she offered words of encouragement. If you're scared, you can team up and fight together. I can still assess your cultivation level. And Lin paused momentarily before suggesting, How about Merlin, Cassidy? You two come and me together? You've been holy disciples for so long, so you should have some synergy with each other. Merlin and Cassidy readily accepted this arrangement, and Lin didn't want to embarrass himself too much, so he offered another word of encouragement. If you defeat Teacher Ancient Dragon Empress, you'll each be rewarded with 3 milliliters of holy blood. Boom, boom. Heaven-crushing power erupted into the heavens. Chapter 1492. Merlin and Cassidy's eyes lit up with an unprecedented scorching light upon hearing that they would receive the holy blood if they won, as if the light of life and the flames of hope were burning within their eyes. An unprecedented heaven-shattering aura erupted from the two of them. So what? Cassidy looked at the Ancient Dragon Empress, and her aura became more and more dangerous. Merlin's expression was extremely firm. For the holy leader's blood, I'll crush even the heavens. The Tao of heaven crushing was something that one's heart desired. However, the Ancient Dragon Empress and the Ancient Dragon Empress' thirst for blood trumped everything else. Due to this thirst, they were able to elevate the true intent and power of their heaven-crushing techniques to new heights. It was just as Merlin had said. For the holy leader's blood, they would crush even the heavens. The Ancient Dragon Empress expression shifted again. You're using your own essential pursuit to enhance the Tao of heaven crushing? The Ancient Dragon Empress expression shifted again. You're using your own essential pursuit to drive the Tao of heaven crushing? This wasn't impossible, but the increase in the heaven crushing Tao's true intent was far too exaggerated. This doesn't make sense. Sonic booms erupted. There was a sonic boom in the air. The two of them were already hurtling toward the Ancient Dragon Empress. Cassidy's crimson sword and Merlin's ghostly aura soared into the heavens. Both of them unleashed extremely astonishing power, as if they were going to tear through the entire heavens. Heaven-piercing sword. Cassidy let loose a clear cry, and her crimson sword soared into the sky before crashing down, dyeing heaven and earth a crimson color. Heaven-slaying ghost. Merlin summoned countless inky black ghosts, which blotted out the entire sky as ghostly wails and howls erupted forth, threatening to tear the entire sky apart. The name was very intimidating, but Lin was struck by the urge to throw up a mouthful of blood upon hearing it. Each and every one of their techniques was aimed at the heavens. To be honest, it really did sound very strange. The Ancient Dragon Empress stood at the center of the energy vortex, as if she were the heavens that were about to be destroyed. She knew that the voice of the true dragon alone wouldn't be able to break through their spell techniques. These two were very powerful. She clenched her fists, and 2 golden dragons revolved around her arms as she launched them toward the 2 oncoming cultivators. How? An earth-shattering roar erupted. A golden dragon burst forth from his fist, containing extremely powerful might as it blasted toward the crimson sword and the ghost. The golden light destroyed all evil and broke through the blood-colored sky. There were ghostly wails and the sound of blood, swords breaking. In an instant, the world was replaced by golden light. Merlin and Cassidy both threw up mouthfuls of blood in unison before tumbling to the ground. It's over. The ancient dragon empress was still standing on the spot with a haughty expression. It's over. Cassidy stood up and wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth as she gripped her crimson sword tightly. There is no end. Merlin also stood up, and the ghostly energy around them became denser and denser before condensing into an indescribable viscous mass that hung behind them like a waterfall. It won't end before I defeat you, Cassidy said. We can't end this before we obtain the blood of the holy patriarch, Merlin said. Raphaela's pupils contracted slightly upon seeing this. Their heaven-crushing true intent has risen again? How is this possible? For the sacred blood, kill. Merlin summoned the heaven-slaying demon over 10,000 feet tall. Cassidy had condensed 16 heaven-severing blood swords that were powerful enough to shatter all things. The two of them pounced toward the ancient dragon empress again. Roar. The heaven-slaying demon spread open its inky black, demonic claws and stabbed viciously toward the ancient dragon empress. Golden dragons revolved around the ancient dragon empress' fists as she launched another attack toward the heaven-slaying demon. Amidst the violent collision, the heaven-slaying demon was almost torn apart by the ancient dragon empress' golden dragon, but the ancient dragon empress' feet were forced to slide back for some distance. This was the first time she had moved during a battle. Right at this moment, the 16 blood swords pierced through the sky, as if they wanted to tear the sky into pieces. They dyed the sky red, carrying with them a vast might that could cleave the heavens. It was as if the sky itself was weeping blood. The ancient dragon empress sensed danger. She was the fourth heavenly disciple of the heaven-crushing sect. How could she feel threatened by two newbies who had only been cultivating the heaven-crushing techniques for 10 days? Heaven-piercing armor. A translucent armor covered her body. At this moment, the blood sword had already descended. Hua hua hua. Sword intent tore at the ancient dragon empress armor in a frenzy. A few crisp sounds were heard. The ancient dragon empress was astonished to discover that cracks had appeared on her armor. The heaven-crushing intent is so powerful and terrifying. The ancient dragon empress was shocked. She gritted her teeth, and a dark yellow divine light revolved around her fingertip as she pointed a finger forward. Heaven-crushing millstone. A burst of dark yellow power erupted from her fingertip. Almost in an instant, the blood sword and the devil were crushed by that power. Even the aftermath of that power was destroyed. They were completely and utterly dead. Merlin and Cassidy were knocked flying again. The ancient dragon empress was panting slightly. That attack just then had clearly been quite taxing on her. To think that Master was forced to use her true heaven-crushing power. Raphaela had thought that this was going to be a simple test, but she was clearly wrong. Lu Qianhuan had given her a sense of awe, and this time, these two blood tribe cultivators gave her a huge fright. To everyone's surprise, Cassidy and Merlin crawled to their feet again. We won't give up until Teacher, Ancient Dragon Empress, is defeated. Erg. A crazed expression appeared on Cassidy's face before she threw up a mouthful of blood, as if she had sustained some severe injuries. We won't fall until we get the holy blood. Merlin roared into the sky. The Ancient Dragon Empress was in a panic. What kind of F*** contestants were these? What kind of tragic and stirring character was this living performance of an unyielding destiny that defied the heavens? Thankfully, a pair of hands clamped down on the shoulders of the two fanatical blood tribe cultivators. Little my, that's enough, and Lin spoke with a serious expression. But tears welled up in Cassidy's eyes. If it weren't for the fact that Teacher Ancient Dragon Empress held back, you would have been dead already. You won't be able to defeat her. You've already done a very good job. And Lin smiled. In reality, they had already done far better than he had anticipated. For the sake of the holy blood, these two were simply too terrifying. After giving each of them a milliliter of blood, the two of them were finally appeased. The Ancient Dragon Empress paused for a long while before asking, "Who's next?" Teacher Ancient Dragon Empress, you still haven't given your evaluation of Merlin and Cassidy, and Lin said with a fawning expression. The ancient dragon empress face convulsed slightly. Evaluation? Were those two insane people? In reality, she had been completely blown away by their insanity and had forgotten to give an evaluation. Both of them have exceptional aptitudes, and they are able to use their most fundamental pursuits to enhance the power of heaven crushing, which is very rare. Hence, Mr. Lin used his own blood as an incentive to drastically enhance the combat prowess of the blood tribe. The ancient dragon empress looked at Lin with a fake smile as she spoke. Cassidy and Merlin stared at Lin with a fervent expression before turning to the ancient dragon empress with gratitude. This evaluation was simply too sincere. It was too deep in his heart. And Lin, he had really shot himself in the foot. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have reminded the ancient dragon empress to give an evaluation. The ancient dragon empress was a little elated, and she turned toward everyone else. Who's next?